and welcome to day 2 of the Business of Data Festival, our brand new digital brawl. Over the past 18 months, we've seen many businesses transform their operations and accelerate their digital transformation roadmaps to meet their rapidly changing expectations of their customers. Over the past 18 months, we've seen many businesses transform their operations and accelerate their digital transformation roadmaps to meet their rapidly changing expectations of their customers. At the same time, the way professionals and business people look for inspiration and insights has changed, and that's why we're excited to present our most ambitious project to date, the Business of Data Festival. Alongside my co-hosts David McClelland, Courtney Stanley, Kate Tappin, Craig Stewart and Siobhan Hady, I will be taking you on a journey across the world to hear from over 70 of the world's foremost experts in data, analytics, digital and IT. From some of the world's biggest and best known brands to you, it's truly a global collaboration, and all amid a worldwide pandemic. Whether you are joining us today from home, the office, or perhaps even somewhere more exotic, we hope you'll be entertained and take away some nuggets of inspiration. If you'd like to connect with the rest of the audience, you can chat with them right now by using the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen or by clicking on the People tab on the left. Our morning sessions feature discussions from our studios across the globe, and this afternoon we'll be showcasing specific insights tailored to the challenges and opportunities of the regions that interest you the most. The Business of Data Festival really is your passport to fascinating insights, research, discussion and debates. Plus, if you miss any of the sessions, do not worry, you can catch up later by watching them on demand. So do be sure to share the registration link with your colleagues. And finally, thank you so much to the many people that have helped us realize this vision, including our global premier partner, Precisely, together with Click, Domo, Coursera, Tigergraph, Privitar, Metric Insights. And with that, let's get this day started. Hello and welcome to day 2. We are kicking off with our second day of global content with a superb panel discussing winning with a data-centric culture. It is wonderful to see you all here today in person. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Amazing. So, data-centric culture. I want to start on a bit of a scale because we all love data here. Tell me where you are on your data culture journey. 1 being very gut-driven, 10 being absolutely data culture is part of my organisation. Where are you, Pramal?
5 to 6.
5 to 6? Samir?
Probably around 4.
We're an 8.
5 to 6 as well.
Oh, we have a bit of a range. So I'm going to come back around. Why have you positioned yourself in that particular number on the scale? Is there any defining features that you would say, yeah, that's why I'm there? Nurali?
Because operationally, we're really data-driven, and now it's about moving towards using insight-enabled transformation.
Okay.
So it's getting over that hump for me.
So it's the next stage of the journey. You can see it in Insights. You've achieved quite a bit, but it's about the next stage. Brilliant. Paul?
So it's one thing having a really good data strategy, but as Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we have to have a strategy that helps our community and our people really develop and nourish that culture, because that's going to deliver the successes and the value from data.
Absolutely. Samir?
I think for me, the business model of where I'm working itself is changing, and different business models evolve, and data and analytics evolves with that. And with the changing business model, for example, the Royal Mint has got a very manufacturing lineage, which is why the lineage has been not so much data focused. Now we are moving more into investments and e-commerce retail, which is much more data focused. So we are on that journey, but that journey takes time.
Absolutely. Then Pramal?
I thought that our culture was actually much more data-driven. And actually, with COVID, I think we've taken a slight step back. And again, now we're accelerating again. So it's kind of probably gone from a 6 or 7 back down. And I think, hopefully we'll see it kind of swing back up again.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that answer, especially because that is so true, right? It's intangible, and cultures do shift and change. If you have different executives who come in and change the strategy, or even the wider business, so much can change. So with it being quite intangible, you can't touch a culture. What would be the identifiers that you can walk into an organisation and say, okay, yeah, I think if you were going to go in and do that same scale to an organisation you're not part of, what would be the sort of things that stick out for you? Smith, I'll come to you first for that one.
I think for me, there are two things, one at the top and one at the bottom. The top one is look at the business cases, what the main business cases, what is the value of data in those business cases and what is the role of data. Your leadership team is the one thing, look at their background, what industries they have come from, and how widespread they have got. The bottom part for me is you can, as a experienced data person, you can look at the investment in data, look at the technology infrastructure, look at the skills, and look at everything that goes with the data flow and easily figure out within 5 minutes how important data is to that organization. And normally with the culture, you tend to look at the speak saying, where is the evidence, where is the data, does data become part of this? And that'll give you an idea of, does data have a veto power? Does it have an elusive seat at the table or not? So those are the key indicators that I look at.
Amazing. And when you say a seat at the table, what would you expect to see when is it very physically that you have someone in that data position involved in board meetings? Like, what does that seat at the table look like in practice?
I think either, so you have to have a senior level data sponsor, which I call a cheerleader. So you have to have a very strong cheerleader, either in the form of a C-suite themselves, CDAO, CDO, CIO, whatever, or if you haven't got that, and if you don't need that level of seniority, then at least a senior cheerleader who comes from a data background either supports data, if they're not, even if they're not data driven, at least they support data in the decision making. But you have to have that seat at a senior level, somebody championing and cheerleading it.
Absolutely. And Narada, you say you've achieved quite a lot in your culture and you've got the next steps, but what would be the identifiers for you of a good data culture?
So coming into Openreach, I looked at three things. One was what are the technical skills across the organisation, which, what tooling and all the foundation work that you spoke about, Samir, as well. How well do people read data? Because there's one thing about reading it, translating it as well, and actually understanding it. So how well do they read it? When they look at a graph, and a simple test was, you put a graph out and you change the axes up and you see what the different people. I do it here today between us, and we'll all come up with a different story with it. So then, how do you fine tune that story that aligns to our business strategy between us, so we all interpret it a similar way in line with the business? And then the third identifier factor for me is behaviour and attitude towards data. So you get people that are data avoiders, that they look at it but still go off and make their own decisions, by gut, or they are, you get people that are fully immersed. And working in an operational business like mine, people are fully immersed in data and numbers and, where's the next line need to be put in, where's the fault existing, for the network. So those are my three kinds of things. When I'm assessing a culture of an organisation and its attitude towards data, those are the things I tend to look for.
Okay, fantastic. Paul, how about you? What are those kind of key identifiers for you and within your industry as well? Is there anything particular that really stands out to you as, yes, that I can identify as a good data culture or slightly not so?
Yeah, well, the approach we took at JOL was to take our team and analysts on a journey to help improve them to see and understand data. So we had a North Star moment of a plan on the page that would explain our vision, ambition, calls, values, strategic intent, and then our annual objectives would fall out of those. And the vision's clear that everyone has to be able to articulate and say, we're here to help people see and understand data. And the plan on the page helps focus. And then we have to help the team with change management. We help them with continuous learning, design thinking, and then uniting the community. So my team's about 130 people, 6 countries, 9 time zones, virtually working, never come together, and formed in a pandemic. So if we don't have that culture and everyone living and breathing the same way and going in the same direction, we've just got no chance of being successful. And then that helps us engage with our leadership teams and actually use the data to ensure that we've got a data-centric focus on getting the results and killing noise with data.
Absolutely, and I think it's really interesting you bring up the remote side as well, because I think when you, as you said, Nirali, you walk into an office and you can kind of see what sort of technology is there, and it's a very physical thing, but actually when you're talking remotely, it's about the mindset behind the organisation as well as those physical attributes. Now, Parag, you mentioned there that the pandemic shifted your culture slightly, and as we said, it's already an intangible thing that can shift. So what would be the kind of the key identifiers that stay a little bit more static, perhaps, that don't shift as much?
Certainly from our perspective, when I look at data culture, it's what kinds of decisions is it driving? And if I look across the breadth and depth in terms of culture, I say actually how wide is our data going in terms of across the organization, and actually who is really using that to drive decision making. So that's certainly one angle. And then the other angle is actually, can we measure the ROI? So actually, what is the value that the business is getting from a data-centric culture, and actually what kind of metrics can we look at to measure that? So I think it's decision-making and value and ROI.
Really, really interesting. Now, Nirali, I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned earlier about the gut-driven people, those that just want to go with their own experience. And we don't want to devalue that, right? There's going to be people within organizations who have a wealth of experience, who can add so much context behind the data, and it's very important. So what do you do to make sure that we don't leave that behind? We want people to have that experience, but we want data to influence and innovate alongside those ideas. So what would be your advice to the audience watching today to ensure that happens?
Data on its own is absolutely not of any use. Data with experience will enable you and your organisation to accelerate, to innovate, to be creative. And the kind of bit of an example I would give, an everyday example, is if you think about a bit of a GP, you go see your GP, they will look at some test results. So, they're looking at data. They'll look at your blood sugar levels, for example, or something. They'll look at your medical history, which is data. And then they're putting their experience into it and advising you of what condition or something you may have, and then what is the suitable. And then you both then agree a course of action. So this is like, I was trying to find a way to explain that it has to go together. You can't do one and you can't do the other. But the most rawest, I think back from my health background as well, it's the way I explain that experience and data have to go together. You can't do it without. And I think the one thing we as data leaders, and if you move around organisations, you need to respect that experience as well, because actually your data can be wrong sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that lends into the communication argument as well, because you don't want, obviously you're going to be precious. Data analytics departments are going to be precious about their data and the reports you're building. So if you have an executive that comes up to you and says, these numbers don't look right based on my experience, you need to have that level of communication that goes, okay, why do you think that? What is presenting you with this doubt? Because that could be very important, because again, it needs to be that hand-in-hand experience. And I guess as well, we don't want people to be blindly following data either. Yeah. I mean, just a classic example, I was driving down the motorway, sat-nav peeped up and said 70 mile per hour speed camera ahead. But I can see driving past, it's a 50. So I'm not going to trust that data because I can see in front of me, it's quite clearly a 50, but if I trust that, and it's that type of thing as well. We want to encourage people to question the data healthily. But how, Paul, do you find that balance of, maintaining that culture that you have people questioning it, but not questioning it to the point where they dismiss it because they're like, oh, well, I don't think it's right.
And our industry, so in corporate real estate, we're a 200-year-old business. And we've got a number of our people that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, be it a facility manager, an engineer, or our account directors that support some of the biggest organisations in the world. And they've got there through experience because historically, they never had the data to help them with those decisions. So we take them on a business partnering journey to really help kill noise through trust and transparency, and actually either support that gut feeling that they've got. So if they've got a hunch, let's use the data to quickly assess and support what they're doing and help them confidently move forward, or have the confidence to challenge that if we're not quite sure. And if we can stand over the data quality, because as you said, it's one thing presenting a number, but if you don't know if that number should be 1,000 or 1,000,000, then when you present it, you lose that trust straight away. So if you can stand over the quality and even say, actually, we're really not sure about this number. We can only give it a 20% validation, but let's work together to improve that. Then you go on a journey together and they understand how you can help them improve their business decision making.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about, right? We want
Sure.
these business decisions to be as accurate and as best as they can be, especially in the turbulent time that we have been, where business decisions are being made
Yes.
so quickly nowadays as well. And I mean, I'm interested to know, Samir, from your point of view, you've got one of these executives, perhaps, say hypothetically, that is very gut-driven, and you're struggling to maintain a communication path that means you can actually encourage data. There will be people in the audience who are experiencing that. What would be your advice to try and get them on board with the data culture journey?
So I think, first of all, as Nirali said, experience to me is a series of data points, because they have covered that 30, 40, 20, whatever number of years. And to me, even as data leaders, if you ask us, we make gut feel all the time. I mean, it's not all about 100% data supporting it. So first of all, giving them the confidence, the executive saying, I lead the data team doesn't mean that I make my decision 100% on data. So that's number one. Giving them also the trust in them, saying your gut feel forms the hypothesis for me. So that is the first port of call for me, saying, okay, through your experience, you are saying something which I really cannot dismiss. What I can do is I can take it back. I can have a look at factual evidence. I can come back to you. We can have a good discussion around that factual evidence. So that collaboration, that team sport of gut feel and data working together. Trust is the big, trust and relationship, obviously, we are all humans. That's the biggest thing. With an executive, you first have to establish that your data self is outside the room. It's you yourself inside the room, trusting them, taking their respect and the value of what they're saying, and then getting back and doing it. The other thing that I'll say is, once we have got the data, and if the data supports them, that's fine. If the data doesn't support them, then have that discussion, and have that discussion around context. Most often than not, data will be wrong, as Nirali has pointed out, because data doesn't see the context. What humans see is the context. So we can analyze lots of data in the absence of a particular context. Your data can be sparse, data quality can be very poor. So again, you have to be very upfront to that executive, saying the data is not saying what you are saying, but these are the limitations of the data. So we have a very healthy discussion saying, within that limitations, let's discuss what the end goal is, whether your hypothesis is free. But in all of this is the discussion and the trust and the collaboration, and data and gut feel being a team sport.
I absolutely love that, the idea of it being a team sport, because that every person within, I'll go with rugby, living in Wales, I've got to. Yeah. Every person has a key part in that team, right? It may not be the same, the skill set looks very different, but it is that element of keeping that ball in the air.
Absolutely.
So that you can be successful together. And I think that is then the wider culture, right? It's not just about a data culture, but the organisation culture of everyone playing a key part in that. And I mean, Premal, the year you've had with the pandemic, gyms being closed, then open, then closed, and now back open, which is exciting. How has the culture moved along those lines, and the uncertainty behind it as well? What have you done in terms of strong user cases where data's really enabled you guys to stay afloat and successful?
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly, COVID had a pretty major impact in terms of our business. But actually, even though the period where the gyms were closed, actually, there was a heck of a lot of modeling going on behind the scenes to say, look, when we are able to reopen, actually things like capacity, things like occupancy, actually, how are we actually going to utilize this data? So what it actually did from a beneficial point of view, it really accelerated some of the use cases that we were tinkering around the edges kind of pre-COVID, but actually we almost had to use it overnight. So that was certainly one area. The other area is really how can we mix the things that we're seeing from a data point of view with what our frontline teams are telling us. So we've got more than 180 gyms. So we've got hundreds of frontline staff giving us fantastic information. So it's mixing those two things together, which is the kind of heuristic element and the data element to get a more contextual picture.
Absolutely, and I mean, for all of us, the wider employees can sometimes have the most accurate data as well when it comes to customer experience, whether people do feel safe in your gyms or whether it's engineers, are they able to access what they need to do. But I want to go around the room. COVID, what impact has it had for you, Nirali, in your data culture, but also in your data teams as well?
So in our wider organisation, the culture, the data culture, I think it kind of moved us back into that operational mindset, which is fair play. COVID came along, everyone went home to work. Suddenly our broadband tripled in usage, or I say tripled, it's probably quadrupled in usage. We've just got to remember, right, it's a 100-year-old network that was running the country. The digital infrastructure that we rely on is over 100 years old, and it ran all of our home, Teams calls and everything. So the strain that network went under, and then the engineers went under. So we had to, even the engineers were like, which job do I do first? Because where is it critical? We had, if there's, no connection, that's the jobs you prioritise. So you're constantly adapting, but you were constantly looking at all levels, from the exec to the engineer, and the minutiae bit of detail that existed. So, and there's nothing wrong in that, because you had to react to a pandemic and keep everything connected, but that's where our culture went into, So then we kind of had to come out of that curve and that dip a little bit to get back into that insight-enabled transformation, because we want to become a data-led continuous improvement organisation. So we don't want, I don't really want my CEOs, looking at the minutiae of detail every day of the week, but we've come out of the pandemic, so my role now is how do I bring that culture back up onto its journey, to step away from that. Because as humans, when you get used to that level of detail, across an organisation, you kind of want to go, oh, I want it all the time. The number of dashboards that got increased and self-serve was created just to react as a reactionary thing. And then that meant for my team, they were doing more of sort of the BI work. We were creating models quickly because we had to make decisions, whether they were created with great data quality. So you started making some decisions around, on 80% accuracy of data. Well, let's do that. But what I think that's done, and I'm rambling a bit, is it's given people, more insight and more acceptance that things don't have to be perfect in the data world, if that makes sense. Because up until now, data scientists were like, the data's got to be 100% perfect before I create a model on it. But now they're like, oh no, we can actually create models on something a little bit less. And it, it helps the business, but you get speed to market, don't you?
Absolutely. And I think that, as you say, the whole perfection idea is never going to be perfect. You're never going to make movement. And we know in business, you've got to keep moving, especially in the turbulent time that we've been in. Paul, how about you? What's COVID looked like for you guys? And how's that impacted your culture? But then, as I say, your wider team as well. So
at JOL, it was really interesting. So my role changed in February 2020 to take on this global role of looking at uniting the community. So we'd set up a strategy of, how can we improve our margin through using data? As we all know, data-driven decisions are going to improve performance. But then to centralise our team, so we had a very disparate set of people, so 130 odd people working on specific accounts and specific teams, but not coming together. And then we wanted to work out how we could, once brought together, share best practices, have some standards and bring all that together, and then help them with a clear career development and path through the company. So that was in February. I was employee number one. We set up an org structure that would include a strategy division, a COE division to really help the team come up. And then COVID came. So we had to try and onboard these people and bring them into our environment and make it a safe space where they're going through uncertainty of changing reporting lines and coming together, working across different countries with team people that they'd never met before. Everything was virtual. So the community and the culture piece was absolutely key to enabling them to have a safe space to learn, for us to provide training and support and set up online collaboration areas where they could work together. And then with COVID actually, coming in, we have clients in 56 countries around the world, right? So COVID was hitting those countries at a different time. So what really helped was that our team could come together and work and actually understand, well, what are the questions you're being asked? So if you're in the early phase of COVID, so if you're in China or, you're in some of the APAC countries, whereas actually in America and in parts of Europe, it hadn't even hit at that point. But what were the early warnings? Because you could almost see that, as the sun moves around the world, that the issues were going to follow, and then we needed to create the data solutions and answers. So the team would work together, look at returning to office, look at where COVID numbers were, bringing in external data sources to look at that. And that really helped the culture to thrive early on, because they could get over those challenges of, we can't get together, we can't get together in a room and whiteboard and post-it note ideas, but doing that virtually. And actually, it really brought out the best in the team, and I think everyone's come out stronger and more united, so our culture is stronger as a result.
I absolutely love that, and I love the idea of the safe space, because it's the real human element of the culture as well.
Absolutely.
It's not, when we think of data, I think sometimes you can think of this hard number coding type thing, but actually it's very human. It's very, those numbers are humans most of the time. It's our customers, and actually having that safe space type approach is so important because it, as I say, it humanises us all.
Very much.
And Samir, Royal Mint, what's it been like for you in COVID?
It's been very interesting in the way that we are a public sector body, and overall, if you look at questions asked in the parliament and everything, where is the data, where is the evidence, you would never hear that in Westminster and all that. That happened a lot within the Royal Mint as well. Obviously, the culture comes down from the Treasury. The reason I say it is interesting is because I talked about the context of data. We did a lot of scenario planning, and our team was heavily involved in forecasting and business modeling and all that. But the challenge was exactly as Nirali pointed out. This context we had never faced before. So there was no precedence, there was no trusted data that we can base our analysis on. So the top guns were asking, give me the scenarios, give me the data, give me everything. I need more data because I don't trust my decision anymore. Everything around me is changing, so I need to hunch my decision onto something. And that something became data for the whole country, not just for us. The problem you've got is you haven't got the data. So it was kind of a tricky situation for us. Obviously, I think we sort of muddled through it. The moment we developed a scenario plan, it was made redundant because something else hit.
Yep.
So it's kind of a back and forth culture all the time, saying, I want more data. What has helped us really is they've become much more data literate. They now know, and this is a pun, but really when people are faced with uncertainty, they want to hunch their ideas onto something else to scapegoat it. And that scapegoat became data. In a bad way, but in a good way, that helped the data analysts come out of their hiding room and say, look, data is such an important entity. The whole country's strategy is led by data. So there has to be something that our organization has to trust the data. So I think the culture moved on from a scale of, I said earlier on 4, the culture moved on from a scale of 2 to 4 during that time, which would have taken a much more longer period to move on.
Absolutely. And I won't say who it was, but I was speaking to someone on the podcast recently off of record, and they were saying, 3 or 5 years ago, they'd be up on a conference floor saying, we need to be data-driven, let's get our organizations data-driven. And then COVID happened. It was like, whoa, okay, yeah, can we slow down on that, please? Because suddenly everyone, as you've all said here, was demanding this data, and they were knocking on the data floor, and suddenly all of you became incredibly busy. So where do you take this now? Because we don't want to return back. I don't think that's going to be even possible. But where do you take these people who are now far more data-driven? They are more data literate because they've had to be. The reporting's increased, the modeling's increased. They've upskilled themselves out of necessity. So what do we do with it? Where you are with your culture now, what is next? How are you going to continue and nurture this relationship? Pramal, I'll start with you.
I think for me, this is a really interesting inflection point because data is kind of much more mainstream now than it ever has been. So from our organization's perspective, it's how do we actually take real advantage of this? How do we actually get data into the hands of masses, but actually how do we get different people evangelizing for data as well? So for a long time, it's felt like one-way traffic, which is where we're trying to push data to the organization. But actually for me, the holy grail is, when somebody from the business will come and talk to me and say, hey, I've come up with this new algorithm, or I want to talk to you about this. So I think we're on that journey, and to create further two-way dialogues, I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Samir?
I think everything that Pramal has said, and I would add that data with this, first of all, 2 things. One is the mindset has now changed. The context has helped change the mindset. The other thing that we as data leaders have to do is data has always been considered, a utility, an enabler, and so on and so forth. It is not a utility, it is not an enabler, it is a commercial driver. And that is what we need to, whether we work in whichever sector we work in, as data leaders, to change the culture, we have to ensure that everything, somebody mentioned ROI, I think you mentioned Premal, you have to make sure that your data is really the commercial driver and establish the link between the two. Otherwise, the mindset will return back to normal. Mm-hmm. And I always talk about a question of data equity. We talk about brand equity and others. They are so important, data being said the new oil. But as data leaders, we haven't got something which says, okay, company A and company B are the same, BT and Sky. BT has got better data than Sky. What is the equity? What is the data equity? If somebody buys BT, how much more equity because of better data they're going to pay? And that's where, as data leaders, we need to come together and get to and establish that link between commercial value. I think that will change the culture a lot.
Absolutely, and such a big challenge as well. It sounds so easy to say, but it's such a huge,
absolutely.
Huge
I mean, the
challenge.
brand equity took about 50 years to get to a point where brand was recognized as an equity on the balance sheet. So we have to start somewhere for that to end.
Absolutely. And then, Paul, is there anything practical that you're going to be doing? I know there's lots of leaders I've spoken to on the podcast and others that they're setting up internal podcasts, and they're setting up, one of our Global Advisory Board members has a data bar, which is a virtual bar where people can come and ask questions and it not feel in a pressured environment, so that they can continue this growth of the culture and literacy. Is anything that you'll be doing similar?
Yeah, so interestingly at JLL, we're doubling down on the data culture now post-COVID, right? So actually it's an opportunity to really take that data fluency, and we've looked at the language of data literacy and data fluency, and we've kind of gone with fluency to try and make it more of a softer way of someone helping them on that journey of being fluent in the language of data and almost having information as a second language is the approach we take. So looking at all of our people, be it our data engineers, and making them fluent in the tools that they've got. So we're bringing in gamification programs to take them from rookies to rock stars. And if they're using Tableau or Alteryx or Snowflake or whatever tools that we've got, we have a gamification program with badges that they get involved in. And culturally, they love that because they see themselves on a leaderboard and so-and-so's just got this, and pass on the praise. But then the data analysts have a separate set of fluency requirements. So actually, how do they interpret the data and help tell a story? And how do we have that business partnering element? And then you've got business leaders who need to understand the data that you're giving to them, right? So they've never had so much, and as everyone said on the panel today, you know, they're almost drowning in data, and sometimes they don't understand the quality, and they're making decisions based on poor quality. So how do we educate them in better understanding and self-serving as well, using augmented analytics, or you know, having the ability for them to type and ask questions of their data like you would with Google. And then the final element is actually the C-suite, who have a very different need and just want that high-level aggregated view, and actually trying to use data in the boardroom and in meetings. So stop the PowerPoint presentation of here's a screen grab of a Tableau chart. Actually, let's have the Tableau dashboard up and live, and let's be asking questions as we're going through and getting those answers. So actually the C-suite are really empowered to make really fast decisions. So it's that fluency across the whole breadth of the people that we support, and ultimately that keeps sustaining and driving the culture further on.
Yeah, and I do love the idea of going into a meeting and seeing it in real life, because it's all about bringing it to life and getting that excitement, and then being able to, someone pipes up in the meeting and says, oh, what about this? And you can go, okay, 1 second, and it's demonstrating, and it encourages those questions, because at the end of the day, it's asking those questions to the data is where you're going to get the exciting stuff. Now, Nirali, I know you mentioned earlier, you've kind of gone through this era now of asking, or rather giving such detailed insights to the point where we probably don't need to do that in the post-pandemic world. So how are you going to balance keeping that culture, increasing it, but also reining it back? So again, as we've mentioned on the panel, you're not drowning in it. We don't want to put people off.
So we're simplifying our program of outputs. So really simply saying, you know, my function, I've done similar things. I've brought a load of people together into a single function where I am. So we're simplifying, removing duplicated work. And so we'll have a suite, we do have a suite now of self-serve dashes out there, and that should give, you know, execs through to managers enough detail to run their operations as a business. And then what that enables is it's given me capacity within my function to start looking at the insights that they can get out of the data or the opportunities. So we have in my own team on a Wednesday afternoon, I keep Wednesday afternoons completely clear, what we call deep thinking time. And so they work on projects or ideas, because actually these are the guys that look at the data day in, day out. They create the dashes, they do the modelling. They've got some amazing commercial ideas.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's about going, on a Wednesday, they spend their time doing that. And then every month I'll get one of them to come into one of the exec meetings and go, right, present your idea. Why is it going to work? And why is it not going to work? And so doing that in that way gives the execs or the other execs something different to focus on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The only problem with that at the moment is everyone wants to do everything, right? So it's about how do you prioritise, and it's and how do we then use that as part of our sort of evolvement and transformation programs in the business. So that's the way we're handling it. I'll let you know in about a few months' time when it works.
I love that.
But I just love the work that they're doing in terms of simplification, and they're coming up with some really amazing things for the engineers as well. So,
and I mean, for me, I love the fact that you practically go into a calendar and book it out as well, because I know recently we've all been on back-to-back Zoom calls, right? For many of you, I think this is the first in-person thing you've done since the pandemic. And if you are back-to-back Zoom calls and you're communicating constantly, where does that innovation happen, right? And I think we're moving into a really interesting era, actually, where people are returning to perhaps the office or hybrid working, that we can actually reassess our time a bit more. We've gone from crisis management into a new exciting era. Now, the last question I want to ask you, I started out by asking your own internal organisation, but on this wonderful panel today, we have a good representation of different industries. It's the same question I asked you at the start. 1 being very gut-driven, 10 being superstars, data culture, absolutely on board. Where would you put your industry on that scale, Kamal?
I am also going to put it at a 6, I think. If I kind of look at health and leisure just broadly, and I look at some of the developments that are happening in the health and leisure space, whether it's kind of wearables or Internet of Body type stuff, I think actually there's a fantastic runway that we're just about to go on, and it's going to be a fascinating next few years, I think. So I'd say we're just over halfway.
Thank you so much, Ramal. Samir, how about yourself?
It's an interesting question, because Royal Mint has got 3 sections: manufacturing, e-commerce, and investment. Manufacturing, I would say 2. We are at 4, but the industry is at 2. E-commerce, I would say the industry is at 7, 8. We are at 4. And the investment banking, I think, in the investment side of things, again, I think the industry is at 6 or 7. We are at 4.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samir. Paul?
So I would say corporate real estate's at a 4 or a 5. So although we see ourselves as an 8 and see ourselves as being leaders, we acknowledge with people move around the industry and come and join us and leave and go elsewhere, that actually a lot of things are gut-driven decisions out there through historic experience. So we as an industry still have a way to go in order to turn that into more data-driven insights.
Thank you so much. And then Nirali?
well, we're an industry of 1 because we run the digital infrastructure. So it'll be 5, 6 because at the moment there's no one else running that infrastructure for the UK. So
absolutely.
I'll stick to my original. I was like, hang on, do I want to reassess my number? But anyway.
After this conversation, speaking to the fellow thought leaders. Yeah. Well, thank you so much all for joining me today. What a great discussion. And I'm definitely going to take you up on that offer, Nirali, of chatting with you in 4 months' time to see where you are on that journey. Amazing. Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for your time, Catherine.
Now, let me pass you over to David, who is ready and waiting with our next guest. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm excited now to be joined by Eddie Short, Chief Data and Analytics Officer at O2, who's going to talk me through hyper-personalisation and customer experience at O2. Welcome to the festival, Eddie.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
Talk to me about hyper-personalisation. I want to know what hyper-personalisation is versus normal personalisation and what it means to you at O2.
It's a good question. I think 25 years ago, and I'm old enough to remember that, we actually talked about one-to-one marketing and a personalised experience. And it's taken a long time to get there. I think if you then look at that personalised experience, knowing your customer, knowing what they want, being able to offer them a product and service, things have moved quickly, but then maybe not quite as quickly as we would expect. But what people expect now is what we would call hyper-personalization, which merely means they want to have the right experience at the right time, in the right context, wherever they are. And for us, that means a customer who is in the context of, if they've got a problem with their service from us, if we're offering them a product, if we're offering them an accessory, we want to be able to make sure that at any one time, we offer them the right message, the right offer, the right action, the right experience. And the right offer might actually be no offer. For example, if I look at the context, in a traditional marketing context, we might be trying to offer somebody the latest tariff on an iPhone 12 Pro. And
the big expensive one.
Big expensive one. And yet actually, 2 days ago, they had a problem with their bill, or actually there was a problem with the network. In old world, we'd still be trying to sell them the iPhone 12 Pro. In new world, actually, the right thing is now just to give them, maybe just offer them a little incentive and just a little apology in terms of the quality, and actually build more the relationship so that in a few weeks' time we can offer that service. As a business, we know where you are. We have a lot of context about what you do on the phone, and if you've given us marketing consent, we collect about 2,500 attributes around an organizer and around an individual. That's a bit less than your average Amazon, Facebook, who collects up to 25,000, but a lot more than your average organization. So we're in the business of trying to offer that truly personalized experience on an almost like one-to-one basis about where you are, when you are, what you're doing, and that for us is hyper-personalization. And the only way you can really achieve that is with really good data and really sophisticated machine learning analytics. A human being cannot make that in-context decision at the right time, the right place, to actually deliver to a human, to deliver to another human being the service they want. We absolutely, though, believe in, I would call it cognitive computing. Rather than completely taking out the human being, it's about human plus machine learning to give that best experience. And that's what we're about.
That's the artificial intelligence versus augmented intelligence argument, isn't it? And the benefits there of that hyper-personalization kind of work internally as well as direct to consumer, don't they? So, you're talking there about additional insights that you have on your customers, enabling your sales or customer service staff to make a slightly different, to tailor the offer to where their customer's at. In terms of direct customer benefits, with me on my O2 mobile, going about the country, doing whatever it is I'm doing, are there any other benefits, any other use cases you can think of that really sell that hyper-personalization vision? Well,
let's be candid. The standard mobile phone service has become quite commoditized, hasn't it? 5-10 years ago, it was all about how many minutes. Then it was basically how much data, and we've got tens of gigabytes up to 100 gigabytes. Now, as you say, pretty much for 20 quid, you can get unlimited everything. So our focus now is, as an industry, we have to look at how do we actually offer more value to our customers in order to maintain our revenues. Otherwise, that traditional service is going to be a declining one. And so for us and for our customers, it really means offering things over and above what you would just call airtime and data. So in simple terms, that's more things that you can do with your phone, accessories, your classic AirPods, your watch. Exactly, smart watch. It's also then additional services, so for example, insurance type services. It's also the content type services, so whether it's Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Music, Apple Music. And when you start to add in those different services, because we know the type of person you are, because we've got our personalization, we've developed what we call behavioral tribes. And actually what their wants and what their needs are changed based on the context and where they are. We can actually offer them something which is actually relevant to where you are. So if you're sitting there going, well, actually, I only really buy a mobile phone service and it's kind of pretty much commoditized, I don't care about it, we've almost lost the argument. We are trying to build on the fact that as somebody who knows where you are effectively now your mobile phone is part of your lifeblood. It's part of you can't operate without it. The mobile phone network is the provider of that infrastructure, and we want to be the trusted provider that you can build additional services on top of, and that's what we mean to our customers.
And it's that word trust that I want to pull the thread of next a bit, because many companies, many organizations are putting trust into their core messaging. We want to be the most trusted provider of X, Y, Z, and I'm sure it's very similar with O2. When it comes to data and insights, the kind of insights that you were talking about there, and the 2,500 data points per customer that you have, for those of us in the industry, for those of us who get excited about data and the value that can be derived from it from an organisational point of view, that's great. If you were to have that conversation with one of your customers maybe who maybe has signed up to the marketing stuff but doesn't quite know what that means, they might be quite scared by that. They might find it quite spooky. So how do you toe that line using the hyper-personalisation insight that you get to build trust rather than, through that spookiness, begin to erode it?
It's one of the challenges of our age. The fact is, you can do some pretty creepy things now with AI in terms of anticipating people's needs. And if you go to Amazon, you go to Facebook, they're always putting you some advertisement, some advert, or something you want to buy before you've even thought about it. And I think what we find is the challenge that people are prepared, have got a higher tolerance for things that they don't think they've paid for. They think that's for free, versus something they have got as a paid-for service because they put us in a box, in a bubble. We trust O2 to do these things, whereas Amazon, Facebook, well, we know they're a bit dodgy, but a lot of these things are free, and therefore we're quite happy to take. What's really important for us is we have the lowest churn in the industry, we have the highest net promoter score in the industry, and therefore we have a lot of customers that we've had for 10 or more years. And therefore, what we're trying to do is, with a more advanced machine learning and AI, is continue on that trusted relationship and steadily add a bit more insight to the customer. I talked about the behavioural tribes. We know where you are. We don't certainly turn it up to the max and say, all right, yeah, you actually need this. We know you're on the golf course, and actually, what you really need is to order a new set of Titleist balls. It's kind of like, it's more that we got some more insight about what you like and what you do, and as a consequence of that, we can gradually offer you more an extension in terms of services or more content, and that's the foundation of our business. And say the good marketer, the good salesperson meets their customer's need. The great person uses data to anticipate the customer's unmet need, and it's basically using our insight to just kind of push the envelope about, because you trust the O2 brand, because you've been with us for 10 years, we think, and we know you well enough to think you might buy this from us, or actually this service, and actually we've got this partner. So it's gradually building that.
Yes, and that's the next frontier, predictive retail. And you talk about the data points that you have already. This is going to explode over the next few years. We are a couple of years into 5G's consumer rollout, at least here in the UK, and we expect the number of cellular connected devices to proliferate both in the consumer space, where we see a lot of this activity at the moment, but also in the enterprise space as well. And that's a kind of new frontier for many telcos at the moment. So in terms of what's next, what opportunities you feel you might be able to get from this new wealth of data that you will have accessible to you, how do you see personalization and hyper-personalization changing, expanding with these new opportunities on the horizon?
So yeah, that's a good question, David. And for us, we already have got a number of services already, which include what we call O2 Motion, but effectively, because we have location data, and where people are, we've been monetizing for some time around helping organizations with infrastructure planning, transport planning. We help the government in terms of how people move around, because we've got that kind of movement data. With 5G, and we have a huge bigger pipe and ability to offer much more service off that pipe, but we're already working. We're at Millbrook Proving Ground. We're working on autonomous cars. We're working with a number of health authorities around automated medical services. And if I can give you an example that kind of trying to bring things to life, I talk about, instead of just selling data, we could create a data wrapper or data-enabled services. So as an electric car driver, I find it, because I'm not a Tesla customer, I happen to use a Jaguar. There are dozens now of different charging networks that require you to have a dongle, a different credit card, a different login. So envisage the situation from O2, which is basically, we know where you are, we can plug into your GPS, we may already be on Apple CarPlay already. You're going for a meeting, or maybe you're taking the family to the cinema, in this kind of post-COVID kind of world. Actually, the optimum charging place for you, for the car unit, might be 2 miles away from your end destination. So we know where you are, we route you to that. We actually arbitrate through open banking with the banks to actually make sure you've got credit straight with that network. Because it's the last mile, we've already booked your Uber, get you to your venue. When you've had your meeting, when you've been to the cinema, Uber brings you back, your car's fully charged, we know where you're ready to go. It's that kind of integrated, orchestrated service powered by data with us at the heart of it, but connecting other providers and adding value to which is what we think is part of the future of that data. You add that's a business to consumer example, but all those things together, we are already the biggest partner of smart metering in the UK. So we already have more connections on our network than any other provider. And we think about IoT, and as I said, the healthcare example, the car example, there's an awful lot of things that we can do to option more business-to-business services, and that's the future of our business.
As a fellow electric vehicle driver, I feel the pain with the charging almost every journey. And the vision that you paint there, to use another mobile visionary's quote, creativity is connecting things. Steve Jobs, I think, said that. And that's the point that really excites me about the case study. Hyper-personalization within one vertical, within one brand. Great, you've got all of these insights, but on a day-to-day basis, I interact with any number of different brands, any number of different services. So it's that ability to apply those insights, to connect the dots and to create value-added services that will allow me to take an Uber, that kind of multimodal thing that I could do on my own, but it's a lot of brain power to do that, and I probably can't be bothered, frankly. So as a service provider, being able to provide that value-added layer, that's where I think it's very, very exciting. And I find it fascinating that that's an area that you're looking into as well, connecting the dots, connecting my life and making my life a lot easier. Surely that's one of the big visions of this degree of hyper-personalization and hyper-connectivity.
It is, and I think that whole thing of a set of additional digital data and digital services that do connect your life is really important. And we haven't touched on it, but yeah, we've literally, as of last week, we formally formed a joint venture merger between O2 and Virgin Media. That brings us their fixed network, which actually allows us to save money from an infrastructure perspective. But the opportunities of basically taking the services that Virgin offer through already a phone service, now which will be backed by our network. Their network basically is now the fastest provider around the UK. The television angle not allows you to compete with the likes of Sky, but brings you in more homes, more relationships, and more trust to actually add more digital type services. And suddenly we expand from just being that mobile network provider to that trusted provider which can help you improve your quality of life.
So let's turn this back to our audience, really. Obviously you are on a really fascinating journey with the data that you have access to in terms of hyper-personalization and customer experience. For anybody who's watching who maybe is just thinking about how they can embark on that journey, what would your advice to them be in terms of the building blocks that they require in terms of the analysis of that data and then making that data accessible to the right teams? What would your advice be?
I see AI is just another version of analytics, but for me, data and analytics are like yin and yang. You need to bring both things together. You don't just need great data, you need great analytical modeling. And I think for most people, the panacea, the electric car example I gave you, people say, wow, fantastic, but how do I get there? And I always think really for most organizations, for most people, it's seeing is believing. Why do people always like spreadsheets? Because quickly they can do something. Within 10 minutes, everybody can produce a little table and a chart, and actually, wow, I've got some insight from that. And I think for everybody who's embarking on this journey, it's actually how can you help in small ways to build trust with your colleagues? Because I think it's that point of trust. It's actually trust inside the business, trust with your team, as well as trust with your own customers. Small baby steps, repeated, can actually build you things. Showing people the art of the possible, because actually often people just don't think about what is possible with data. You actually need to have that relationship with people, so you need to build rapport with other business stakeholders. As you work together, your synergies will allow you to think about use cases that actually you hadn't imagined were possible. And I talk about the art of the possible and the art of the probable. You think about if we could do this, this, and this, we can get there in 3 years, but draw that back. Actually, we can do this in 3 months. So that's where I think people win hearts and minds, because candidly, we've still got a long way to go in terms of data. I think what the likes of Amazon and Facebook show you is that is the art of the possible. The rest of us have got to move a lot faster, otherwise we're going to have our lunch eaten. It's like Pac-Man. They're coming along, they're actually eating various bits of services. We need to move faster, otherwise we're just part of the machine.
Yeah, and to your earlier point, in a market that is commoditized, heavily saturated, you need to find those insights, those ways of engaging with your customer that will create those more, ultimately, the clues in the name, personalized, those more personal connections between brand and customer that will make them want to trust you, make them want to go on that journey with you. You mentioned we're at a fairly early stage here. In various industries, we have maturity models. Where do you think O2 is? Do you see yourself as being at the kind of cutting edge or bleeding edge, or kind of like watching the cutting edge and going, yeah, I think we'll go in that direction?
So I think if I look at where O2 is, if I looked at that maturity level of, say 1 to 5, when I arrived at O2 2.5 years ago, I was painting, and so Amazon, Facebook is pretty much on level 5, and we were probably at level 2. I think now we're pretty much on level 3, looking towards level 4. We need to get in the next 2 years to be at the top of level 4 to still be in the game. Because if we're not, basically, because Amazon and Facebook are at level 6. It's kind of that's how fast the game is changing. But yeah, so we've made a lot of progress, but we've still got a long way to go.
And finally, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but you mentioned it a moment ago, the merger partnership with Virgin Media. How do you see that changing the game? Potentially, you're going to have a load of other data from an organisation that's been quite separate. What are the challenges or opportunities you see with potentially merging those data sets and creating new connections with your customers?
Well, yeah, so our vision is to be like the UK connectivity champion. In fact, reimagining connectivity, it's reimagining what you can do, not just as a telco, but basically because it's that connected lives. And as of literally last week, the 1st of June, we legally formed our joint venture, but you could say merger, because it's 50-50 between Telefonica putting O2 and its business in the UK together with what Liberty Media did with Virgin, putting us together. We have 47 million households that we're now connected to. We're the 6th biggest actual financial transaction in the UK this century. There's £31 billion connection. We are, you'd say, neck and neck with British Telecom as the biggest provider in the UK. So we've got scale, but actually it's what you do with it. It's kind of what I think we have got, say, with the Virgin brand and the O2 brand, is we've actually got two of the strongest brands in not just in the telco industry, but you'd say two really recognisable brands to people in the UK. And we're really focused on also the challenge of post-COVID. How can we help the UK upgrade? Because we're going to be investing £10 billion in UK infrastructure with 5G and dark fibre over the next 5 years. And as a business, you bring those things together. The fact that we're in so many homes, we have so many connections, we think we can offer, I'd say, beyond those telco services, a whole bunch of digital-enabled, data-powered digital services to eventually everybody in the UK, and go beyond that, you'd say, that commoditized base that we've inherited. That's still our foundation, it's our cash cow, but from that we can actually go much further because of the trusted relationship we have with customers.
Well, as we've certainly learnt over the last year and a bit, connectivity is incredibly important to us, not only to carry on working and playing, but also to connect with our family. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed, Eddie, for joining us. That was a terrific session. I look forward to catching up with you again further down the line to see how the service, how your vision is playing out in the real world. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, David. Thank you very much too.
Don't forget, if you're enjoying our content here at the Business of Data Festival, to use our hashtag on the socials and connect with our brilliant guests.
Thanks, David. Great conversation there with Eddie from O2. I am now joined virtually by Gaurav Deshpande from TigerGraph, who is going to talk me through some fascinating case studies surrounding driving business outcomes with graph databases and AI. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you, Catherine, and hi to everybody from around the world, from Korean global community. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you for inviting me and TigerGraph to this wonderful event.
Well, we are so happy to have you. Thank you so much. And I mean, I'm so excited about the conversation we're going to have here today, because I know when we've caught up previously, this is such a passion area behind you. So I'm super excited that we get to spend the next 20 minutes discussing it. So I think it's best that we start out with a pretty basic conversation, because I think we could get into real detail real quick, and I want to pull us back from doing that, because what I'd love for you to do, Gaurav, is just explain to me, what are graph analytics?
Wonderful question, and thank you, Catherine. The best way to describe graph is in the words of somebody who has implemented it at large corporation. So Brad Spires is the executive director at JP Morgan Chase, and he recently presented at Graph Plus AI Summit, which is organized by TigerGraph. It's an open industry conference. And he said, graphs clarify relationships. I think that's a beautiful way to say what graphs do. Graphs is connected data. And when you connect data, you clarify relationships. And graph analytics is all about digging deeper into the relationships, analyzing them to find good patterns and to find bad patterns. By good patterns, I mean things like customers who are ready to purchase more of your products and services. And good patterns would be things like understanding what is happening in terms of improving my customer satisfaction, improving my customer service. What can I do to do that? And bad patterns would be things like things that are related to fraud. For example, finding fraudulent activities in your payment network, finding money launderers in your network, finding cybersecurity attacks that are likely to happen. And also bad patterns could mean that you look at the DNA information and RNA sequence within that to see that certain patterns lead to particular type of cancer. Finding those good patterns and bad patterns is what graph analytics does. And graph analytics, when you take those patterns and learn from those patterns, that's graph-based machine learning. That's the easiest way to think about it.
I mean, it just drives home the importance there as well. The examples you gave from fraud through to something as crucial as understanding cancer. I mean, it really just really highlights how exciting this is as an area of innovation, if we can really help those members who are probably the most vulnerable in our community as a whole. So it's very, very exciting stuff. So the area I want to pick your brains on first, Gaurav, are what are the challenges of that you're currently hearing from all of the customers that you have with trying to connect their internal and external data sets as well as their pipelines?
Wonderful question, Kathy. I'm going to give a couple of customer examples to bring it home. So we'll start with an example from the healthcare side of the house. United Health Group is using graph-based analytics as a part of their operations. And what they are trying to do is connect across 200 different data sets and pipelines. And they're doing that using a graph database. So when you're trying to connect across 200 different data sets, all of your patient information and all of your pipelines that are streaming in real-time information as the claims are occurring, as the payments are being made. United Health Group is number 6 on the Fortune 500, $249 billion or so annual revenue. They have 50 million customers that they call members because you're a member of a particular health plan with United Health Group. So when you have 50 million customers, you're trying to understand all of the data about them, all of their patient history, all of their confidential data, and also streaming data, real-time data that's coming in about different claims, medical claims, and their payments and all of the other information. You're trying to understand across those 200 data sets and pipelines, you're trying to build a single view of your customer journey with you over the last several months, over the last year or two. When you're trying to understand that journey, one of the things that they wanted to create was, they have 23,000 call center agents. Every time you call a 1-800 number, somebody picks up the phone. In the United States, they also operate in Brazil and other Latin American countries. So somebody picks up the phone in Brazil. That call center agent wants to look at real-time 360-degree view of the customer, one of those 50 million customers that I talked about. That is what we provide as a part of graph-based analytics. So this is the reason why graph analytics is really powerful, is because you can connect across all of your data sources, all of your pipelines, streaming data, real-time data, also with batch data, like Kafka is a technology that's used for streaming data. Apache Spark is used for batch data. You can connect your Spark pipelines, your Kafka pipelines, and all of your static data, all of your master data, all of your infrequently updated data, and build a single 360-degree view of the customer, product information, item information in case of e-commerce, a 360-degree view of all of your entities, and be able to analyze that information, again, understanding relationships and finding the good patterns and finding the bad patterns. And that's back to the patterns again, because really graph-based analytics and machine learning is about finding those good and bad patterns by connecting all of the data.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's so crucial. I know we would have spoken about it in the festival, and I'm sure it will continue to be such a big topic, but that 360-degree view of the customer is what we're all striving for. So it's really exciting that graph analytics really supports that, because it is such an industry trend. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again, the market demands this now, and we really need to be doing it. So it's no longer a choice for organizations to be customer-centric. It really is a must now. So that really influences organizations, I suppose, to be really behind this. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I think it really changes. There's a quote from Bible, right? For one, I was blind, now I can see. Right? You suddenly can see the whole picture of your customer, and now you can understand that with real-time information. See, data warehouses, data marts, a lot of your viewers are coming from a technical side of the house, and also business side that uses data warehouses and data marts. A common question that I get is, hey, how is this different from what I'm doing with my data warehouse? I already have a data warehouse. In fact, I have many, right? I already have a huge data lake. I have data marts. How is this different? The difference is you're taking real-time data and marrying that up with the rest of your data to find patterns in real times. That's the main difference. So that changes the behavior. And then now United Health Group's example, they can deliver much better customer service to their 50 million customers that are picking the phone and calling. In addition to the call center agents that I mentioned, Catherine, the other group that uses graph-based analytics is data scientists and executives and others who are actually using graph-based analytics to understand which are patients or members that are customers that are similar to this particular customer. If I find a bad pattern, like a particular customer had a resurgery of the knee because they did not attend physiotherapy sessions on time, how do I find other customers that are going through that pattern, and how do I act now so that the customer doesn't have the pain and the expense of going through a resurgery in 6 months? So finding those bad patterns that might result in resurgery or that might lead to a type 2 diabetes diagnosis 3 to 4 months down the line. And then finding the good patterns that see that this particular patient is improving, they are doing better. How do you take those good patterns and try to replicate those so that your customers can live a healthier life, right? So it's all about customer care when it comes to that giant company, and their focus is really, really clear. And that customer-centric focus is augmented with a real-time customer 360-degree view powered by graph-based analytics.
Absolutely, and using those key learnings, as you say, whether good or bad, to then influence your future. Now, what you've displayed so far is just absolutely fantastic in terms of the capabilities and the fact that you get this real holistic view, but also, I know from chatting to you before, a really quick view of them as well. So what I'm keen to understand from you, Gaurav, is how has COVID impacted how this all works? Because having this sort of view and having it rather quickly, I'm assuming, would be a huge advantage.
It is a huge advantage. And I'm going to now take another industry example for COVID, which is on the other side of the pond. So United Health Group is based here in United States, in Minneapolis area. Now I'm going to go to the other side of the ocean. I'm going to go to UK, United Kingdom, Jaguar Land Rover, one of my favorite automotive brands. I grew up with Jaguar Land Rover's cars, Jaguar cars. absolutely love them. So they were going through this, as you know, COVID-19 pandemic hit last March. And overnight, 60% of the supply picture changed. So Harry Powell, director of data and analytics, who also presented at the conference a couple of months back, Graph Plus AI Summit, which is organized by TigerGraph, he mentioned that all of the sudden, 60% of the picture about the supply chain. The countries that could ship, you could ship seamlessly through Europe as if it's a single country. Countries put up their border walls, even wouldn't let parts get through some of those borders, right? That was the first problem. Second problem is factories shut down, partially or completely, which means the parts that you used to get from suppliers, you can no longer get those easily. And the other part that changed, which was a surprise for everybody, including Jaguar Land Rover, was that the demand profile changed. What I mean by that is, in the United States specifically, they realized that Evoque is one of their models and Discovery is another. The demand for Evoque started spiking and the Discovery started going down. How do you take parts that are available from the supplier that are still able to ship you parts, take the Discovery's parts and make more Evoques out of that so that you can make money now? The end outcome is the fascinating part. I mean, all of this demand supply match used to take 3 weeks for them with a relational database. Now they have moved to TigerGraph graph database that's optimized for performance. From 3 weeks, supply chain planning is 45 minutes. So that's a 700 times acceleration. So what you can do now is you don't have to wait over weeks to match the demand and supply. You can do it in minutes. We can do it several times throughout the day as the situation changes, several times throughout the week. And then you're able to react to that much faster. The end outcome and the business results is what all of us care about, because ultimately, show me the money, right? Show me where the business benefits are. So in case of Jaguar Land Rover, they shared that they were able to increase their annual profits by 100 million British pounds. Annual profits, incremental annual profits because of advanced analytics based on graph. So that's the power of better advanced analytics, is that 100 million incremental profits per year realized in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic.
And I mean, what a brilliant example. 3 weeks to 45 minutes. I mean, in normal senses, 3 weeks, that's doable in business. In COVID times, 3 weeks is a long time. A lot has changed within 3 weeks, the various lockdowns we've all been part of. And so having that, and as you said, being able to run it several times a day, that may seem extreme to anyone watching this back in years' time might think, well, that's a bit excessive. But actually, given how much we went through during at least the first moments and months of COVID, it was needing to be that severely close to the mark of knowing the situation for many organizations. So absolutely phenomenal results there that they were able to really get those insights so very quick and accurate to them as well. So I'm keen to know from you, Gaurav, any more examples you can give on how organizations are learning from connected data within in-data ML.
Yeah, in-database machine learning is exciting for me, for an AI geek like me. So in terms of my career, I started with AI in manufacturing, which is operations research. So I wrote a program that's still used by multiple manufacturing organizations over on the East Coast in the metal manufacturing for optimizing those workloads. So machine learning is particularly exciting. AI is particularly exciting for me because I've been in that area for 25 years. In-database machine learning is very exciting because your data is already inside the database. Why not learn right there from the data, the good patterns and bad patterns, and apply that insight in real time, as opposed to exporting out of the database, doing it in a separate machine learning platform and bringing it back in. So that's the power of that. Let me illustrate it with the customer example, because it's better that I let customers speak rather than me talking about it. So I'm going to talk about Graph Plus AI Summit again. 2 months back, Intuit Corporation, which is the parent corporation of TurboTax. TurboTax is used by about 40 million or so American households to file their taxes every year here in the United States. So TurboTax, parent organization Intuit, also has a service called QuickBooks. Right? QuickBooks is used by about 80% of the restaurants that you walk into a New York or a San Francisco restaurant, and you buy you get a takeout, or you sit down there and have a nice meal. when you pay for that with your credit card, that payment goes through the Intuit's QuickBooks payment gateway, which is a payment clearance service. As a part of that, every transaction that goes through Intuit QuickBooks payment service is checked for fraud in real time. So that's in-database machine learning for checking for fraud detection in real time. Interesting part is they have been able to cut the fraud in half for Intuit QuickBooks, and that's a documented case study. So they cut the fraud in half. There are two aspects to fraud. First is finding real fraud, right? And stopping it in real time. That's the first thing. And that they have reduced the instances of the fraud through the network by 50% using in-database machine learning with Tagegraph. And the second instance is declining legitimate customer transactions. All of us have been in that situation. I was recently in that situation. I tell you my own story. I'm in the middle of a jewelry store. We were visiting India at that time. It's our wedding anniversary the next day. And I have told the bank that I would be charging, it was 14th wedding anniversary. So I was told the bank that I'd be charging $14,000 US. They kind of wanted to make it, a really special gift for my wife. So I'm pulling my credit card out. I made sure that I have the credit line, I have everything, and it got declined. After that, I never used that credit card overseas or even here ever again. I literally stopped doing business with that bank. So that's called a false positive in fraud detection. They have cut those in half into QuickBooks in addition to reducing the real fraud by half. So that's in-database machine learning for you. Everybody says, do we really have to do it in in-database? Yeah, for the mission critical use cases like fraud detection, you should do it. Other use case that Intuit is using is entity resolution. Entity resolution is a fancy word for linking multiple customer accounts together to say this is a single identity of a customer and this customer has multiple accounts with me. They are also doing that in database entity resolution with Tagegraph, and they have moved to near real time for entity resolution. That means a new account is created, it's an existing customer, within seconds it's attached to that particular customer's account. So that's in database, entity resolution, machine learning, fraud detection, and the third use case is personalized recommendation. Personalized recommendation meaning this customer has already bought these products from me. How about we sell them other products that are related to that? And that's a third angle for in-database machine learning. So all of this, three use cases, entity resolution, fraud detection, and personalized recommendations, all of those stem from in-database analytics and machine learning combined together. And Intuit Corporation is using all three of them right now.
I just keep gasping. Being able to cut fraud in half is just phenomenal. And then, as you say, I love that example because I think everyone within the audience has had a similar experience. It's just embarrassing when you're stood there and you're trying to pay for something and you end up getting, declined.
Because I saved for months. Catherine, for that for that gift. It was a surprise gift for my wife. And Absolutely. There I'm standing, my head hung in shame, and people are looking at me as if I'm a fraudster, right? It's very embarrassing. So exactly. It's an experience that all of us have had at some point in time. And that's the one that's called a false positive in fraud. They have cut that in half also. So that increases the brand loyalty and customer satisfaction dramatically. They use more of your product, which means you make more of the money. Exactly. And the customer gets a better product.
It is just that snowball effect, right? Because as you said, you wouldn't have used them again. It would have been such an experience that you would have been like, no, I'm not putting myself through that again.
Absolutely.
And it's about having that holistic view of the customer, saying that actually it's not just a case of, oh, sorry, this time we got it wrong. It's a false positive, but it's actually about knowing that wider scenario. And it's so, so important. Now, Gaurav, I've got only a few moments left with you today. But I really want to know, this conversation has been so exciting already, but what's left, what's coming in the future? What exciting stuff is there still yet to come?
Oh, we are literally scratching the surface of this. Okay, 7 out of top 10 banks are using right now Tagegraph in the world. 7 out of top 10 banks uses for real-time fraud detection and credit risk assessment, which is the major area where somebody's applying for a loan, somebody's applying for a credit card. Should they get that credit card? Should they get that loan? So we do those two use cases, but now it's expanding very rapidly inside the financial services sector to go to the next 100 banks that are adopting that. And that snowball is starting to occur. Then even the banks that have adopted it for real-time fraud detection and credit risk assessment, they are looking at and saying, I want to implement real-time customer 360 example that I gave from United Health Group. I want to have a real-time customer 360 like that. I want to identify those good patterns and sell more products and services that my customers need without giving them something that they don't need, right? Without bothering them with offers that they have no relevance for them. So that's expanding very rapidly within the banks and outside other banks. The pharmaceutical industry is really coming on in a big way on two sides. Clinical research side, I mentioned that we are working with Technical University of Denmark to literally find better treatments for a particular type of cancer that affects children primarily. It's called acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's the blood cancer that affects children. And we are working with them to find better treatments. Why? Because you can combine gene data and look through the patterns of RNA sequencing there to find bad patterns that can indicate that there is a possibility of a cancer here in the future for this child. So we're working on the clinical side, and we're also working on the commercial side of pharmaceutical industry. Their example, there's a company called Exact Sciences. It's a biotech company, and Exact Sciences is actually building a Doctor 360 because doctors are their customers who write prescriptions of the Exact Sciences product. They make colorectal cancer drugs, among other things. So Doctor 360, combining that with their product 360, and then understanding what is the most effective way of educating the doctors about Exact Sciences product so that the people can receive the right care. So pharmaceutical industry is ramping up, manufacturing is ramping up, retail, e-commerce, huge explosion because everybody is trying to compete for your dollars online. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? You understand the customer better. So every e-commerce company is looking at graph-based analytics and graph-based machine learning now, talking to us as they go through that process in Tagigraph, and then looking at that to say, how do I grow e-commerce channel better? It grew like 40% last year. People say, how do we keep the growth going? Absolutely. And that's part of what we are seeing. So it's a broad industry applications. We see that in about 5 years, most of the workloads that are, this is Gartner prediction. They said 10% of the companies are using right now graph-based analytics and machine learning. Mm-hmm. It'll go to 80% by 2025. Wow. So we are seeing that huge hockey stick spike up. And I'm really excited about that. And frankly, I'm excited about the possibility of better care for cancer.
Absolutely.
Better treatment for cancer.
Again, it rounds us off so nicely with this conversation, Gaurav, because it just shows the importance of why we're all doing the amazing work that we do here in the data analytics community is, to make lives better and to be able to really support that is just such a wonderful thing. So thank you so much for this wonderful conversation today. I certainly feel all warm and fuzzy after having that great conversation there because it is just so important.
It is so nice of you to invite us here. We appreciate the opportunity. And anybody who wants to go look at Tagigraph, we have a free cloud version. So tagigraph.com/cloud, no credit card required. You can start building your solution. You can even go into production as a startup company without paying us a dime. Use it. And when you're ready to scale it up and you need bigger solution, you can move to a paid tier. So Tagigraph Cloud is what I would request everybody to come and check out. And come and see the cancer treatment case study that I mentioned on Graph Plus AI website.
Absolutely. Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, just as Gaurav has said there, you can visit their website, but right here in the festival platform, you are able to learn more about our wonderful festival partners as well. So I do strongly encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What a brilliant morning we are having here at the festival. Now, I have two brilliant thought leaders behind me who are getting very excited about a brilliant fireside chat they will be having. So, without further ado, I'm going to step out the way and let them get on with it.
Thanks, Kat. Hey, Vip.
Hey, Di.
So you joined the fabulous WPP Data and AI team at January last year. And tell me about your role and your remit.
Absolutely. Wow, January last year, it felt like it was ages ago. But my role is really around discovery and curation. Now, at WPP, we have a ton of data. So really one of the things that I'm trying to do is make sure that we know about all of the great data that we have spread wide and far across our agency network. But it goes beyond that. We're also really trying to understand what great data we don't have and what we should have. So a large part of my role is ensuring that we can start to go and find and curate and democratize some of that data and bring it into the organization, and then so we can use it in some very great and unique ways.
Love that.
So, and what about you, Di? What do you do?
Just bask in the glory and the fruits of your labour. No, we know that's not true. Our remit in our team is really quite big. So whilst you're busy curating and inventorying data, I help with the rest of the team look after our enablement, our AI Academy, our Demystify AI programme, our data and AI community, the affectionately known Sea Dogs, which is our Chief Data Officer group, and also working on some content creation. So I think between us and the rest of the gang, hopefully we've got everything covered.
Absolutely, plenty to keep us busy there. So a large part of us working together is to create an environment where all of our agencies are joined up. What does this look like in reality, and how do we create and nurture the collaborative process?
It's a really good question, because when the team first formed, I thought a lot of people would create a central data lake and start to centralise everything. But that's the exact opposite of what we've ended up doing, and rightly so, because our agencies are all different and they're brilliant, and we have creative and comms and media and experience. And if we just took everything away from them, then we're moving away from the clients and we're just going to homogenise everything. So the collaboration and making it around people is the really important part of what we're doing. So like the data and AI community, we do really shout out on, give people a chance to have a stage. So we invite people to present at our webinars, and I think people really like that because they like to be recognised, they're rightly proud of their work. So we really do nurture the people who are coming on this journey with us and letting the agencies do their own thing with the data. If we can, via the catalogue, democratise the same data set, I think it's really exciting to see what different things the different agencies do with the same data. I think that's part of the fun. But that leads me into a question that I wanted to ask you, because you talked about loads of data in the catalogue, but what's that got to do with creativity?
Oh, great question. Well, it's what you do with the data that's really, really important, right? And that's what we're trying to do, is ensure that we start to use our data in some very unique and creative ways across the group. So, and we're trying to do that in a number of different ways. So whether that's, trying to inspire our people by trying to just really shine a spotlight on some of the great work that they're doing, right? We know that WPP and all of our people are spread wide and far, but what are they doing, and how are they really answering some of those challenges? And more importantly, who are they as well? A lot of what we do is around connecting people overall. So, so we run a series of data stories on WPP Open that really shine that spotlight and let people know exactly what's gone on. But there's more than that. We also want to make data a little bit more fun. And how do we start to engage and really start to draw people into what we're doing? So we run a series of data challenges across the community where we work with partners and set topical challenges that really allow them to harness some of the great data that we have and use it in unique ways. So, for example, the last one that we ran was a great one. It was focused on the Euro 2020, and we partnered with with a weather data provider and said, how could we have a campaign that's centered around the event that used that data? And the winning outcome was absolutely great. It was a campaign for a beer that was based around weather data and discounts based on the gust of wind in the stadium at that time, that created a great experience, not only in the stadium, but also led to you getting discounts out of the stadium too. So those are just some really, really great ways of doing that as well. But then we also want to make sure that we start to build some great solutions and services that everyone can use. This shouldn't just be shining a spotlight and saying, hey, people are doing some great stuff. We want people to be able to use some of that great stuff too. So we're putting investment in the data that we have and allowing our people to really start to use that data to start to augment it with other data sets to produce some very neat and leading edge solutions that really can be used by everyone across WPP. So it's not just a case of here's me and here's what I'm doing. It's here's how we can all operate and do some great stuff as a collective, and here's how we can use it to do some great work for our clients overall.
I absolutely love that. It's one of my favourite parts of the job, when you're having a meeting with an agency and suddenly you go, and we had it this week, didn't we, that we said people talking about some agent-based modelling on vaccines, and then suddenly we think, what about footfall, on starting to look at footprints? And some of my favourite of your data stories where people have used search and demand signals data to look at where there might be people, for example, buying oat milk, or linking search data with weather data to look at outdoor gear. I don't know about you, but it's just one of the favourite parts of my job, when we start to give stuff to people and then they use the Lego blocks that we've made to make something that we never even thought about.
Absolutely. I'm always fascinated about how we just take data and we let people turn it into information and insight, but really in an actionable way, in ways in which they can not only do great things with it for the clients, but also to start to nurture it and use it in really, really leading edge and pioneering ways, and in ways in which we're answering those questions that people aren't really asking quite yet, but we know that are going to be answered. And it's really exciting, it's really fun, and it draws together the best of what we have across our organisation too.
So this is a mean question, because we haven't had this conversation, but what is your favourite data set in the data catalogue?
Oh, wow. That's a real tough one, because there are some really, really good ones. I mean, we've got some very weird and wacky stuff. We've got, stuff about we've got Jurassic data, which really looks at looks at the US and answers the question around, if you were lived in the US today, where are you most likely going to be, likely to interact with a raptor? We've also got American football data as well, which might seem bonkers and bananas, but we've had data scientists build decision trees off the American football data and applied that to next best action models as well. So, the ones that, are really, really my favorite though, are ones around, behavioral data and demographics as well. Because, we live in a time where it's very difficult to use historical data to start to predict out what's going to happen in the future. So some of the signal-based data that we've got, which really has a finger on the pulse in terms of what people are doing in the real world and how their behaviours are changing, are really some of my favourites. So we've got some, some great data from Google demand signals around that, and some from Signal as well. But and it's those ones that are really the most captivating, because they're really touching upon the here and now of what people are doing.
I totally agree, and I love those data sets you talked about, because they're not personal data.
Agree, yeah.
And I do think we've always agreed in the team that we're not going to obsess about identifying people. That's not where the insight is, and that people don't want to share their intimate data, and it's not necessary to get insights and have to know that you're VIP and where you live. It doesn't matter, does it? But actually what you're searching for, or where you're at, or what you're looking at online and what you're reading, that's going to be more of a driver. So I do think I feel like we're at the forefront of thinking really differently about data and how you use it, and to stop obsessing?
Absolutely. You know, trends and patterns mean so much in this day and age. And there's this big fixation about user data and trying to tie data back to individuals. And whilst there is a value, you really need to understand where in your data journey you need to start to apply that data overall. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity of using non-personal data that can really start to help you to understand everything from, you know, behaviors or patterns around retail or whatnot. There's an endless list here, but you don't need to have data that's always tied back to an individual. There's a ton of great stuff that's already out there.
And what I've noticed about us too is we do have to make sure that we give each other time and space in our diaries to think creatively about data, because I don't know about you, I do find when we get too busy that I stop thinking about what the opportunities and what different things, and I know we need to always make sure we give our agency data folks some space to do that too.
Absolutely, and that's why it's always good to invest time and effort in making them do that. So as well as making sure that we've got the headspace to do that, we've got some real great talent across the network. So let's make sure that we nurture it, and that's what we're doing at WPP. We're making sure that people have got that time and we're investing in that time, and we're really allowing them to build upon their ideas and start to innovate and start to create some great things, which is really, really neat and exciting overall. But it's all about making sure that, you know, we capture those great ideas, we create, you know, the space for people to then build upon those, and we do it in a way in which we don't really try to drive for a particular outcome. We want people to, you know, be open and play, and we're not afraid of falling flat on our face, but we never do, right? But it's about making sure that we've got a culture where we can start to do these things without thinking about delivery and day-to-day jobs. It's about making it fun, and it's about making it real, and it's about doing new and exciting stuff that no one else has done, right? It's about doing stuff that people can be really, really proud of. And ultimately, we're just cultivating the great minds and brains that we have across WPP.
And one of my favourite data stories, sadly, we can't take any credit because it had nothing to do with us, but it is exactly what you're talking about, and the culture we're creating was Mediacom's dogvertising. Have you seen that? So they recognise that dogs don't have any GDPR rights, and I'm hoping I'm not going to literally open a can of worms by saying that. And they had cameras on the digital out of home so that for a pet manufacturer, they could, when the dog came past, I think they could even see what size dog it was, couldn't they?
Yes.
And so then they served an ad that was appropriate for the dog, and they only served it when they could identify a dog. And I think things like that is simple, but it's just so creative and brilliant.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's making the most of not only the data, but some of the great technology capabilities that we have overall in some great unique ways. So, and there's tons of this kind of stuff that's going on across the network, and it's important that we bring it all together and bring all of our people together so we can start to do it.
And they do like it, don't they? I know you must get the same. I get emails all the time where people want to share their case study. They secretly want to be invited to do a webinar. They wanted to do the data stories panel. Like, it's good though that people are proud and that they're getting in the spirit of thinking creatively.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, sometimes people aren't as proud as they should be of what they've done, and they're perhaps a little bit too modest. So it's really important that we start to home in on some of the great work that they're doing, but then build upon it, right? You know, because there's so much more potential that can be released by doing more with it. And that's what we're finding. You know, it's only earlier on this week, you know, we're having conversations around some great insights that someone's produced, but it's just like, well, how do we supercharge those? How do we start to layer on more, and how do we start to grow that into a solution that's not only going to be great for, you know, a bunch of, you know, some particular industry verticals and some clients that we have in that space, but across the piece too. So, and that's the exciting thing, when you can start to bring that vision to people and really start to show them what the art of the possible is there, and then but involve them in that journey of then scaling it up. We're not trying to take anything away from them. As you say, it's the Lego building blocks. They come with their Lego building blocks, and we give them ideas about how they can then start to piece those blocks together, and we make it happen, and that really makes it exciting for all of us. It's a win-win situation.
And we do have a lot of fun, don't we?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We had tons and tons of fun doing it. It's really nice when we can then start to do things in a bit more of a human way. I mean, the example I spoke about earlier, the beer challenge, that was absolutely great. Everyone loves beer, everyone loves football. So how can we bring? And you think weather data? How can you throw that into the mix? But it's examples like that really show that you can start to do things that really touch, all of our, everyday human lives, both of our consumers and in our organisation, and we can then start to do some things in some really neat and leading edge ways.
I love that we've got the community that we get to share this and how much they get involved, and the brilliant sea dogs that start to ask to present to their peers on what they're doing. So I don't know about you, but I'm really proud of what we've done in the last 18 months.
Oh, immensely proud. And, and the community that we've got is really big and diverse, and we're ensuring that we're nurturing it in a number of different ways. We've got, it's not just, not full of, a bunch of techie geeks and a bunch of data geeks. We've got people that like to understand how they can use data. So people that aren't, who don't work with data on a day-to-day basis, but really can understand how they can start to apply principles around AI and then have grown-up conversations with clients around how it can be used without going into lots of nerdy jargon about coding languages and all of that kind of stuff. It's all based upon inputs and outcomes ultimately, and then the magic happens in the middle. And we've got a lot of magic going on.
We really do, and that reminds me that to talk about like the layers of the AI Academy that we've got, because it is easy in a way to focus on deep skilling the data practitioners, which of course we're doing, and we've got all that work that we've partnered with Coursera, and we've got the learning pathways, and we're making sure that we shout out the ones that are doing it, so it's a bit of a competition between the agencies. But we are also doing loads, aren't we, on our partnership with Oxford to do the diploma for the C-suites and the AI Business School. And I loved that this year because we asked all of the senior leaders who were on the AI Business School how confident they felt talking about AI in front of a client. And people were showing vulnerability and admitting that they didn't feel comfortable at all. But by the time that we'd worked with them for 3 hours, then they were scoring much higher, that actually they could understand that if a client was saying, well, we need to be AI driven, or a more generic term, that by the end of that they would be able to start to pick, well, what do you mean? And sharing some examples of what WPP do with AI.
Absolutely. But it just really goes to show that learning is there for everyone across the organisation and at all levels. And we need to apply that learning in lots of different ways. So as well as those traditional techniques that we've spoken about, it's really about how do we captivate, those minds to really think about data and AI in ways in which they can start to use it and understand it in ways that are in tune with their own mindsets as well. So, and I absolutely love Demystify AI as a program. I now can have elevate a conversation around what is AI. Something that's quite difficult to do succinctly, right? You can often get wrapped up in some of the detail around it, but it's also great as well because, like myself and others, we can all sharpen our pencils on some of our, more nerdy skills around data too, with our partnership with Coursera as well. So it's really great that learning is at all levels, but it's a constant exercise, and it's something that we're evolving all the time, aren't we? We're looking at, how we can nurture our people and nurture their minds, and how we can then start to keep in tune with new ways of working and new technologies, and ensure that and as well as some of the challenges around it. We all know how data ethics is something that's always on the forefront of our minds as well. But what is it? What are some of those concerns, and how are we approaching them, and how is that evolving? So it's a constant exercise that we're enduring every day, and it's great that we're bringing our people along with us on our journey.
Data ethics is a really good example of it's a slow but steady project that I think will never finish. I mean, we did that. We started last year. We've got 10 agencies together to start to shape what principles and guidelines around ethics would be. And we knew that there was going to be no big launch. You can't just launch ethics. It doesn't work like that. But I think
Yeah.
I know. But I think it's a good example of how we've got 10 agencies who wouldn't have necessarily thought that might be a good approach, but we tried something different, and they were also up for it and sharing with each other to start that conversation.
Absolutely, and it's helped build that support network as well. So as well as having those conversations around what it is and what we should be doing around it and some of those existing day-to-day challenges, it's about ensuring that we're supporting, we've got that support network around each other, so we can then start to help give, steer our people and give guidance to our people around that. And we've got some great ways of doing that, both, sometimes informally through some of the sessions that we have and also through some of the tooling that we have as well. We've got the AI ethics compass as well, which is a great framework for all of our people to use, so they can actually start to apply what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and then qualify it against, our framework around AI ethics as well, and really start to understand, is what they're doing right or wrong, and should they be concerned or not.
And I really like that, because I think the thread through everything we do, isn't it, is around support and collaboration. And as somebody at WPP said to me, it should be inclusion before diversity, because if you're inclusive, you get the diversity. And I think we've managed to nail that we have got different groups of people with different skill sets, different career and educational backgrounds all coming. But, it can be quite lonely being a data person, particularly if you're only in a really small team. But I think we've managed to make sure that we've built this kind of club where everybody's welcome, but it's all just chat about data.
Do you know, one of the things that I've loved over the last couple of years is making those people less lonely, and then putting them together with people even outside of their organisation and getting them to work and collaborate with others. It's really, really great when you can start to bring some great minds together and then get them to work in some really neat ways, because people often don't break outside of their molds, right? And it really sometimes takes us, we're often referred to as being the glue between our people across the organisation. But, we have to do a bit more than that. We have to guide and inspire them and give them, the capabilities that they need to be able to do that. So, which is, why we've invested in some leading edge data graph technology as well, so all of our people can use it, alongside, some of the great capabilities that we have.
We sound amazing. I think our jobs sound amazing.
Well,
I think that is, when you find the job that you absolutely love, you can tell that you just, there's a book on joy, and it talks about the direct correlation between joy and productivity. And I think we do always laugh a lot in the office, but we are productive. But I think everyone can tell that we do love what we do.
Absolutely. I think we've got that right balance between having fun in what we do, but also, use it, but in also creating some really neat and exciting and some amazing things overall, right? And to be honest, sometimes it isn't that hard when we've got a great network and a great organisation around us, right? It's just pulling some of those things together, and that's what sometimes we're merely don't understand though. That's sometimes what we're doing, and that's what's really, really neat. And I enjoy, it's the talent, right? And how we do things. It's, I love the fact that sometimes we'll be going from a challenge that's working with around, a piece around structured data and how we're going to combine, marry and merge and then use it in some really neat ways, all the way going through to how we're going to use unstructured data, right? We always think of data as the stuff that's in spreadsheets and databases, but that's quite old school, right? Data for us is much more than that, and we like to focus on unstructured too. And there's some really neat things that we can do. Sometimes we don't even know about it. It's our people that know about it as well, and it's just trying to get it out of them and then getting them to play.
No, I love all the breadth of how a creative agency data person is different from a media data person, is different from a comms. I think we're so lucky that we get to work with all of them.
So, Di, what are your top tips for other executives looking to harness a strong collaboration culture?
So I think we've covered probably the right words, but I guess maybe I should try and summarise what we've been meandering about. I think we've been really, really lucky at WPP that we have got senior exec support, and my boss comes to the Sea Dogs and he comes to the community. He ran a webinar, didn't he? And it was brilliant.
That was awesome.
And he does he does let us invest in trialing stuff and innovating, and he does, you know, we do have support to keep going. It's not free to run a community. All our people stuff, you could think that it would be free and that we just make some calls and put some dates in the diary, but there's a big resource.
A whole ton of work.
And a whole ton of work and investment that we're asking for. So I do think that's getting that support, but we've set some quite toppy KPIs on 50,000 demystify AI people and 5,000 data scientists upskilled and hundreds of data sets in the data catalog and thousands of users in our AI Academy. And we've really gone really big and ambitious and bold, but I think we've got the support.
Absolutely, and quite rightly so, right? You know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I think really, you know, what really drives this and really makes this stick is around making sure that at the same time, whilst we're trying to nurture and, you know, and bring together all of these great behaviours, that, you know, we actually reward some of the great things that our people are doing as well. So, you know, we ensure that, you know, there's something in it for them, you know, and this is not about, you know, and those incentives are really about making them really achieve something great or ensuring that they can be very proud of the piece of work that they're doing, or, you know, investing in, you know, in making sure that they've got the time and the effort and the headspace to be able to do all of that great stuff. So it really is advantageous overall.
That's one of my mantras, isn't it? That I say all the time and I'm so boring about it, is reward the behaviour you seek. So we don't name and shame anybody, do we?
No,
we never call people out, and we don't tell people or teams or agencies off if it's not the right time. We just big up the ones that are coming on the bus with us, which I think is a much more positive way to drive change.
Absolutely, and looking at my inbox, there's plenty more that want to come and join that bus too. So, and that's absolutely great. And but they bring with them lots of great ideas, lots of great and unique ways of doing some things that, to be honest, are quite amazing. It was only just you know, a few minutes ago I just read an email around a project that someone was working on, and already they had some great ideas. And then it's having those light bulb moments where you think, well, do you know what? You know, there's a vendor that I've been talking to in this space which will be really unique to work with, but there's also another agency that are doing something similar. Oh, just bringing these things together, and it's just like, you know, the ingredients of an amazing recipe, and you can almost taste it without having cooked it, and that's what's so amazing, and that's what really keeps us ticking over at WPP, and we absolutely love it.
We're so cheesy. But I think we've probably reached the end of our cheese fest. And I hope everyone's really enjoyed it, because I obviously always love talking to you.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the cheesier the better.
Thank you. I'll pass you back to Catherine.
Well, thank you both so much. I mean, what a brilliant session there. Now, if you are enjoying the morning, make sure that you are subscribing to the Business of Data platform as well, because Di, you joined me on a podcast before, so you can catch up a little bit further in that content there. But for now, we are going to pass you over to sunny South Africa, where Craig Stewart is getting ready to sit down with Maritza Curry. Craig, over to you.
Maritza, thanks so much for joining us here in Cape Town. You've done so many of these virtually with us, so it's great to be in person. How are you doing?
Fantastic, thank you. And it's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, absolute pleasure. So today we're going to really talk about the converging paths of data. Over the course of the last 12 months, I've really seen a growth in the number of conversations around data literacy, business literacy, and how those two are converging. So we're going to dig into the detail of that later on. But what I'd like to sort of get from you first is really, where do people fit into the overall data strategy? Because I think that's almost the most important part. You know, process can be defined, technology is technology, it's kind of a static sort of hardware thing, but people are the real dynamic in the whole thing.
Yeah, it's I couldn't agree with you more. It's an absolute critical component of your data strategy. And it's something that we often forget about. And, you know, data analytics projects are notorious for not delivering the value that we originally set out. or envisioned that it would deliver, or it takes far longer than we thought it would, or we find that we are actually investing double what we thought we would. And there's many reasons for that, but one of the primary reasons is that we don't consider the people component when we put our data strategies together. So, you know, data strategies are about change. They will always drive change, so you always have to think about people. And there's always people involved in data and analytics initiatives. So whether that is the customer whose data you are analyzing and you have to think about in terms of the ethics of what you're doing, or whether that is the very real person who is on the receiving end of your data analytics products, who have to use it. So, you know, we have to make sure that we think about the people implications. And that is not just the you know, driving the adoption of the new BI tool we are establishing, but it's thinking about training and upskilling, and not just of our technical people, but also of our people in the business who have to use the tools or have to now use data in a different way. So it's really far-reaching. It's across the data value chain, technical as well as our business people that we have to think about. And I think when you do think about your people component, it also has to be data culture by design and not just for the sake of it. So it's not simply reading a few white papers and looking at, okay, this is how other companies did it, so I'm going to do it in the same way, because every company is different in terms of their culture and every data strategy is different. So what's really critical is that you also align your people strategy with the actual outcomes that you want to get from your data strategy. So whether that is from a data governance consideration, you know, if your strategy is to establish a data governance organization, then you've got to think about what does that mean from an operating model and organizational structure point of view. You know, will we appoint data stewards from outside, or will we sort of find and train them internally? What does that mean from a KPI point of view and a training point of view? Or if your data strategy is driving, being more competitive, using data and analytics and establishing an AI organization, then you've got to think about it slightly differently. So maybe think about, okay, what is our current maturity level from an analytics capability point of view? And how do we lift that capability? Do we have skill gaps that we have to fill? Or are we going to upskill our existing analytics resources? So it's got to be very deliberate, and it's got to be thought of in the context of your organizational culture.
Where does that sort of fracture point come in? Because I think over the last 6 years, and this is in South Africa and globally, there's always this conversation around it's the people that are the challenge. And I always ask that sort of tough question as part of the bigger conferences is, you know, why haven't we fixed that as a data analytics community? I mean, I know it's a massive variable. You know, you get different people in, you need different skills, as you say, but why is that still such a challenge? Why is it that people are still not thinking about the people element of their strategy and how that's actually going to impact the outcome of everything that they do through their data office?
I think it's because data strategies traditionally maybe were very technology driven and platform driven. And I do see that there is a shift in the industry, and it's away from, you know, the data team and where their responsibility is in terms of, okay, we at the end of the information or the data value chain, so our responsibility is just reporting or creating data products. So we're shifting away from that to data is pervasive in our organizations, and as a data office we get involved in everything, so from the start of the data value chain. And I think this is where it's really important that as data leaders we've got to partner with other divisions in the organization, because data really is owned and used by everyone in the organizations. And I think one of your primary partners in driving a data culture is HR, because HR can help you define your value proposition to your data and analytics talent. They can help you set up your data and analytics academy, because learning and development have all the resources already. They've already implemented big change management programs in your organization.
So leverage what they've done.
Leverage what they've done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but partner with other people. And that kind of takes your thinking out of just the technical side of things or the platform side of things. And I think that is where traditionally we have failed, is not partnering.
Yeah. All right, I want to get into the conversation around data literacy and business literacy, but almost focus more on the business literacy side, because I think data literacy is something that has been a strong conversation for a while, and I think there's some really good initiatives happening here in South Africa. We've got lots of people with academies and universities like you've just talked about now, but it seems that the data office is really pushing this data literacy onto the rest of business. But how much business literacy does the data office have to really understand the problems that business have, and then be able to co-create models and processes and solve problems that they both have, and kind of feel like it's a team effort rather than just you guys have to be more data literate?
So glad you asked this question, because I think we have been very, very focused on data literacy. It's been very topical, everyone's talking about it, and data analytics curriculums are very focused on the technical side of things. How do you use this tool? How do you use this data? How do you interpret this kind of graph, etc.? But we haven't focused enough on the business literacy side of things. And honestly, it's two sides of the same coin. So I agree with you that your data people, or your more technical people, have to understand the business. They have to understand how the data links with business outcomes, and how data can actually drive very specific business decisions. As much as your business users have to understand how to use the tools. But I also think there is a case for business literacy in the business. So even if you have the best data platform and you've got the best BI tools and your data is fantastic quality, if your business users, and even if they know how to use the tools, but if they don't understand how to use an insight. What does this insight mean for me within my day-to-day, my division? What's the decision I'm going to make? What's my action out of this? You're not really going to see the value that you're expecting to see from your investment.
And that's where a lot of things seem to fall flat, is this sort of no action from insights. Maybe does it come down, do you think, still to the trust of the data itself? There's always this sort of thing, well, I don't know where the data's come from, or maybe it's poor quality. But I think more essentially it's, well, I didn't create that model. I didn't have a say in what those insights actually came from. And I always talk about that sort of not invented here syndrome. Okay, well, it was done in a data office in a lab, and now they're pushing it on me. I'm not going to use it because my experience tells me to do something different. And do you think that's still the case, and how's that sort of being broken down?
I think that these two things that you have to consider. The one is change management. So, again, I think this is something that is hugely underestimated when we roll out new tools or our data strategy or new data models. Even in organizations that is very data driven and has a high level of analytical competency, change is a problem. And again, here's where you want to partner with the people in your organization, whether you have a formal change management division or whether it's HR. You want to partner with people who can help you drive that change so that you can get the adoption that you're expecting. That's the one thing. The other thing is around the trust, and I'm glad you brought it up, because for me, what needs to be part of your people strategy is creating communities and breaking down those silos, because that's how you build trust. And it doesn't have to be only formal. Sure, there's some formal initiatives, so you can work on a very specific way of work where your technical teams or your analytical teams work very closely with people in the business that almost forces that co-creation, or it can be very informal. So monthly knowledge sharing sessions where data teams and the business come together and they share how they're using data to solve business problems. Work with a business on initiatives like an art exhibition of your best visualizations, run competitions in your organization, the best AI use cases, and you win a prize, and be creative, get people excited about data on both sides of the fence, but really drive co-creation and collaboration.
Perfect. All right. Maritza, thank you so much for joining me. I love the sort of talk around the art exhibition of visualization and storytelling. I think it's a great thing to do because I think it kind of changes people's perception of the data. It's not a very technical thing, and get them involved in a really exciting way. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to have you in person.
It was wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And now we hand over to the next session here at the Business of Data Festival.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Siobhan Hardy, and I'm one of the senior producers here at Corinium, and I am joining you today from Sydney, Australia. Joining me now in the studio to chat about promoting data-driven decision-making and innovation is Matt Miner, Head of Group Data and Analytics for Blackmores Group. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt.
Hey, Siobhan, thanks for having me.
First question for you, Matt, is what do you feel are the prerequisites for a business culture that allows for data to have an impact?
Well, look, I'll repeat an answer that a lot of people will probably give you, that it really does start at the top.
Yeah.
So that's the executive team right from the get-go leading with data. And that just basically distills down through the organization. So a lot of focus needs to be given at the top level to give executive teams comfort that they can trust the data and that the data is giving them insights that they wouldn't be normally able to get. So that's where it all starts. If I look back over my career, just in my last job in the telematics industry, I built the company's first analytical product. That really we had like close to 500 million data points coming in every single month, and trying to get the insights from that data and play that back to customers was extremely challenging. But the great thing is when you speak to COOs and CTOs and head of compliance on the other side of the table, and you start to see how they're going to use the data to drive their strategy, you can just, they get it. And that's the big thing with essentially executive teams driving it. You could see straight away that they knew exactly what they were going to do with the data. They had a plan for it, and that was just to get them started. But they had a plan straight after. They knew that once that gave them momentum, they'd be able to basically kick on and drive other initiatives in productivity or efficiencies. So the great news is we have an executive team at Blackmores now that is fully engaged in using data to make the best decisions they can. So really exciting times for us, and with a highly engaged executive team as well.
Amazing.
Now, again, another classic one that you'll see from a lot of other people, but really then it comes down to data ownership. So we can have data flowing through the company and everyone making good strategic decisions with data, but ultimately people need to own the data, treat it like the asset we all know it is. Some of your other speakers have talked about it potentially going on a balance sheet. So I think that's a little bit far-fetched, don't get me wrong, but ultimately there is value in that data. And if the business don't own that data, it can start to dissipate and quality can start to disappear. So a big outcome from the executive team driving that and demanding high quality data is it will just flow through into real true data ownership.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Are you able to provide an update on the Blackmores data strategy and how data is improving your customers' experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at customers, as in our retail partners, and consumers, obviously the people like yourself that buy Blackmores products, there's two different tangents there. But effectively, we kicked off our data strategy back in 2017, and that was very much around just building the foundation. And sometimes it's difficult for people to see the value of that foundation. If you think like you buy a house, if you just see a concrete slab, you can't really see the true value of all the work that's been put in below the surface. It's only until you build the house on top of that and you start to see all the fine tuning that's been done on that house that you start to really see the value. So we're now coming out of that phase. We've built the foundation. For people on the call and listening, we've built the group data platform, and that's our foundation. So now the next step for us now is to really kick in the next 12 to 18 months. We're reskinning our data strategy to take it to the next level around advanced analytics. So it's a really exciting time to be at Blackmores. It's really exciting for my team personally. They've done a lot of the hard yards to build the foundation, collect massive amounts of data that we can now use in those analytical endeavors. So the next 12 to 18 months is going to be exciting.
Fantastic. There are lots of organisations that are looking to transition to the cloud. What advice would you have for anyone based on your experiences of developing the group data platform, and is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. So look, just for the listeners, the group data platform, we're cloud first. Our group IT policy is cloud first from the get-go. We're in Azure from a Microsoft perspective, and they provide great support and enable us to achieve our outcomes. But effectively, I totally get that there will be on-premise solutions, but for me, cloud is where you need to be. All the tech platforms, that's where all their investments go in. All the service providers that hover around these platforms, that's where all their money's going. So we are cloud first, and that's the way it's going to be. The group data platform itself, it's across many different departments. We operate in 13 markets around the world. So we collect all that data on a daily basis. We've got around sort of 3 or 4 terabytes of data already. We process around 200 megs a day of just data. It's doubling in size every year. So we're amassing a huge amount of data. And the successful part for the team is that, so what we'll have to do now is basically start to realize the value of that data. We know it's there, we know it's accurate, and we've got a great executive team with senior leaders now that are really starting to see the value of that. So if I look at some of the projects across supply chain, finance, customers, consumers, we're actually building true data value propositions for our customers. for our consumers, all with security and privacy built in from the get-go. And that's fundamental. We need to give that, we trust the data, but we've got to make sure our consumers and customers know that we're treating their data with the respect it deserves.
Excellent, thank you. So how can you deliver superior results using an agile operating model and dynamic methodologies?
Yeah, okay. So look, personally, everyone needs to work in iterative cycles. Some call it sprints, some will call it Scrum, various different methodologies. But for me, you can't, the days of doing waterfall 6-month projects just are untenable. So now you need to cut that into chunks where you can, for the development team, it's great. They've got like a 3 or 4 week window to operate in. They can actually see the end result. They can think 3 or 4 weeks ahead. They can plan their work and they can cater for any anomalies that come in. For stakeholders, it's great. They get instant feedback. They've got a chance to pivot or divert as they see fit within certain guardrails, don't get me wrong, but you've got to move into iterative cycles. That's just the way it is. So we've been doing this for now, we're up to, what is it, Sprint 25. So we've been doing this for about a year and a half. We've been semi-successful, I'll be honest. On the positive side, the team love it because it is those short iterations. If I think of where we could have made some improvements, I think the main part for us would be around, and a lot of companies will talk to you about this as well, is around product management. So it's a lot of agile methodologies seem to get focused on what the technical people are doing for delivery. But the actual true value and essence and success of that agile delivery model really, really depends on product management in the business. That's a journey that we're going through right now, and a lot of other companies will have a similar challenge, is who is the person on the other end that sets the vision for a data product, that knows exactly what they need to make the data work and to basically take advantage of it. So that gap needs to be filled. And you're asking business people who have got extremely busy day jobs, just like we have, to sort of take that step back and take ownership of a data product or data solution, or in part a data strategy, just for their area. It takes a lot of doing, particularly with so many people around a departmental data set. You're not just going to develop it for one person. So that person needs to coordinate across a range of other stakeholders, trying to gather all their requirements. So a big journey and a big investment that we've recognized at Blackmores is empowering product management. Now, that'll apply whether you're in a digital, whether you're developing mobile apps, whatever it is, it's the same solution. Product management is the #1 job title at the moment around setting that vision and strategy. But where it crosses over with data is around ownership. And if we go back to my earlier comment around how important data ownership is for business for a data culture, then fundamentally we need to make sure that those people that own the product that are going to drive that forward also then grab the opportunity to take ownership of the data. If you get ownership of data right, product management right, and those two roles can be blended, that will lead to much higher quality and basically a data product that will be used across the organization.
Fantastic, thank you. So how do you develop strategic direction and prioritization to drive further advocacy?
Yes, another good question. This hasn't been easy, but I think especially with the IT leadership team we've got in place now, one of the things we're looking to drive is just accountability. So if we come back to data ownership, and particularly I'll be selfish here, it is across the rest of IT, but if I look at it from a pure data lens, then effectively, ultimately the business decide. We can't have, the question is, how do I set priority? Well, I don't. But what I can do is provide an operating model that if the business set the right priorities, that we can deliver exactly what they want at the cadence they require. So one of the things we're looking to put in place with the business is essentially to have a single funnel where yourself could literally go in and say, this is what I want for my data product. These are the kind of reports or analytical outputs I want, and actually push that through a single window that you can go in and you'll be able to get complete transparency around where your request is at, what you need to drive it through the funnel to get it delivered. And we'll be asking you some tough questions. We'll be saying, well, what's the return on investment for this? What are the business benefits? Are there any change factors we need to take into account? So once we get that process in place and we've got those product managers on the other side to manage, police, and guide those tickets through the system, then we'll be in a very good place. So we're really excited. This all dovetails nicely with the data strategy over the next 12 to 18 months to set ourselves up for the future.
Great, thank you. So what does innovation in data and analytics look like now, and what will it look like in the future at Blackmores?
Okay, so for me personally, I think there's a lot of latent value in data that a lot of companies can get too excited with machine learning models and AI and get distracted from what's actually there in their data sets. So I think for Blackmores right now, and we had an analyst the other day, works across our supply chain, a lot of domain expertise. Suddenly we're pairing that domain expertise with the actual data. That person leads with data. And effectively now we've seen from him within 2 or 3 weeks worth of analysis, he's actually found the root cause to a KPI miss, has solved it, put in place the systems and process changes to make that happen, and has seen results within a month. So innovation doesn't necessarily have to be a massive technical output or even worse, a technical program of work. It can actually just be giving people, getting them close to the data to really drive innovative insights. And that for me is where we've seen that firsthand at Blackmores now, and we'll continue to see that. So a lot of investment, a lot of media goes into AI and machine learning, and whilst we will absolutely get there, so we're looking at things like how can we personalize an experience for a consumer, how can we build our next generation group CRM with data embedded at the core so we can give intelligence back to our reps and back to our customers. So we've got programs to do that, but we'd be missing a trick if we didn't actually start to pair that domain expertise directly with the data to really squirrel into some of the insights that are just hidden. I mean, once we find where those insights are and we learn the process and methodology to get them out, then effectively the true goal for us then is to take those insights and push them to frontline systems. So if you imagine if you go onto Facebook or onto a website, somehow it will know who you are, and you're thinking, well, how the hell does that, there must be something running in the background that knows me, okay? So that's great in the digital world. But how do you translate that into frontline systems like ERPs, CRMs, finance systems? Because sometimes that's where key decisions are made. So a big focus of our data strategy will be around grabbing those insights, being able to operationalize them and push them to frontline staff.
So what's been your greatest learning point to date, and what are you keen to share with us?
I've seen a lot in the data world, I must admit. I guess my 2 big learnings are don't presume that the other side of the fence, again, I'm speaking from a technical angle here and a delivery team, don't assume that the people that are using the data are actually ready to go. There's I remember literally 10 years ago, there was all this talk in data. Data's the new oil, if you remember that mantra that came through, and that's 10 years old. Yet there's a lot of companies out there right now that are not even touching their data. Blackmores is on that. It's gaining huge momentum in that area now, and we've actually got latent data there that we can actually leverage. We've broken down the silos with the GDP. So for me, that journey is just about starting, and to actually put up with the frustration that's been here over the last 10 years of my career, and to see us grab that opportunity is huge. So a big takeaway for anyone listening to this is really that stick with what you're doing. If you're building a data warehouse, a data platform, a data culture, a data strategy, is all of those foundations that you put in place, they will get their time in the sun. They will come to fruition. As long as you're doing the right things with the right disciplines, the right patterns and practices in the way you technically deliver those platforms, all that data will eventually come to the surface and will play a key role in the future of that organization. It's just taken a long time, I guess, for executive teams and companies across the board to really learn about the power of data. And then my second learning will be change.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, we've seen it firsthand with so we're an Azure shop. We have all our databases in Azure, and one of the key things we went all in on Power BI. So that's our visualization and reporting tool. And of course, we got all keen and enthusiastic and thought that the business would naturally follow us. So hey, we've launched Power BI, the #1 analytical product in the market. Why wouldn't the entire business jump on that and just go for it. But we had to learn the hard way that even now we're having discussions a year later with people that are yet to use Power BI. So that just teaches me change. Is you need to get absolutely on the front foot right from the launch of your next program and bake change in. How are you going to educate, train, support the rollout of any solution or product that you bring to market internally? And that's been just a huge learning.
Is there anything that you can, any top tips that you can share on how you take those stakeholders along the journey with you?
Look, I guess I admit definitely from Blackmore's is I've learned the hard way, and ultimately the key tip for me is all about just making crystal clear that you know who your stakeholders are. You've been able to articulate a value proposition for them. Don't stick with the technical side of, hey, it's a brand new tool, you'll be able to do this, this, and this. It's, if you can do this thing, you'll be able to get this outcome from it. And that can be a challenge for technical teams to portray that back to business users. So that'd be my key tip, is actually engage your stakeholders on the business side. There'll always be the fast learners and the people that are really hungry to get their hands on it. Talk to those people. Why is it that you like this particular tool, or you're looking to get this outcome? What's it going to do to help you drive better decisions? And really start to plug that back into your feedback in the way you roll out the tool. That's been a significant learning and a key tip for anyone looking to do what we're doing.
Sounds like you've got a very exciting 12 to 18 months in front of you with the rollout of your strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we've got I guess, again, building on that foundation, so we know we've got a very strong footing, but we've got real appetite from an executive team using daily scorecards to make real decisions. They know exactly the pulse of the business. So with their help and support, that all distills down. So now we've got a clear data strategy that's going to, again, we'll go group wide. This is not just a single solution for Australia or something for Thailand. This is going to be a real exciting opportunity for us to build something that's fit for purpose for a range of different markets. And of course, the more you break down the silos, the more you bring data together, the more analytical insights you're just going to generate. And that's where I see the true value down the track. We will produce some really good models, some data products, and some really great solutions for our business users. But the big one for me is all tying all that data together. And really, again, back to that whole thing of, if you can link the domain expertise directly with the data, cultivate the talent, get the two as close together each other, that's where all your insights come.
Terrific. Matt Miner, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your insights.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Now I'm going to pass you over to Courtney in New York, who is sitting down with Joanne Stonier from MasterCard to talk about all things AI. Over to you, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Yes, I am indeed sitting here with Joanne Stonier, Chief Data Officer for MasterCard, and we're going to be diving deep into delivering tomorrow's AI vision today. Welcome, Joanne.
Hi, it's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. We're going to have a good conversation today. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, really.
Well, I have a very interesting question to kick things off, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about it. So, Do you think that some teams jump too soon into AI without taking some of the other steps to manage cultural change in their organizations?
So I don't know if they jump too soon to AI. I think every company, every organization has to take an assessment of where they are on their data journey. And if they haven't done that assessment and they jump right to AI, then it might be too quick a journey, right? Because AI is a very sophisticated data analytic tool. And if you haven't done baseline data analytics, I don't know that you're going to really understand how to use AI and how to do so in a really ethical and responsible manner. So you're going to wind up maybe purchasing AI from a vendor, trying to apply it to a use case, and not really understand what you're doing and what the outcomes are. The more thoughtful way to do it is to really understand your data, understand what purpose or what problem you're trying to solve for, and then really understand, is AI the right tool in the toolbox to use, right? And that really makes a difference. But I do think that everybody's very excited by AI because AI does allow you to really sift through very large amounts of data and really get you to understand what is the data telling you, and then go from there and figure out some use cases. So there's really kind of a yin and a yang to it.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure. And AI is just sexy too. Who doesn't want to make things a little bit easier and smarter and more efficient? So I can understand why organizations might be hungry to just kind of jump in and get going. But I think that your approach is definitely the right one. So how are you currently addressing AI ethics and AI explainability? Do you have to change your team makeup, or did you have to change your team makeup to accommodate these new expectations?
It wasn't so much our team makeup, although we did add some really great people to my team as we realized that our AI journey was going to really take us in some new and exciting directions at MasterCard. It was really more about understanding AI governance, understanding our data better, and understanding what were the purposes we were going to be using AI for and how we were going to be developing AI for the long term. And so really it comes down for us to governance. And really, do we understand the different elements of AI governance before we understand really how we're going to really apply it? So what are the elements of governance? First, do we understand our data, right? Do we understand the data that we're going to be using for any purpose? And so if you first understand your use cases, what are you going to try to use AI for? So for us, fraud and cybersecurity were really our first journey and foray into AI and machine learning. So really, those were going to be our first use cases. And did we have the data sets that we really wanted to use for those use cases? Looking at our data, making sure we understood what were kind of the data flat sides. Did we have missing data sets? Did we understand that maybe the data was leaning one way and was going to give us answers that were biased or inappropriate, right? And then we can talk about only then, what were the algorithmic analytics that we were going to create and feed into AI so that we could really understand what were going to be the outcomes. Once we put all of that together, then what we started to do was use observational AI to actually monitor AI, to really understand the outcomes. So we put together this very, very robust process. And while we were doing it, we did it in proof of concept after proof of concept, and we began to slowly learn about AI before we started deploying it widely. And that began to create a cultural change where our employees began to learn together, both on the governance side, the data quality side, the algorithmic side, the data analyst side, the data scientist side, and then ultimately the teams that were applying the AI to the business problem. It really was a journey that we took on together and in very specific areas of our organization. It really does take a village, though, to build it.
It sounds like it. It really sounds like it. There's some
sure.
AI inception that's happening with AI watching other AI, and it's just, that's so interesting.
That was the most fascinating part of all of it, using observational AI to actually tell us what was going on once we deployed something, right? And that was really fascinating because then we found out, was what was happening with the model, was it legitimate, or was it because we had something wrong in the model itself or in the data we were feeding it? And that allowed us to make adjustments, right? And that was a very, very powerful technique. Now, I will say, once we then deployed it into production, well, it's so much easier to do in a proof of concept than once you deploy it. So we had some learnings there too. So I will say that was another learning for sure.
There's always more to learn. That is for sure.
Absolutely.
So in this AI journey that you've been on, how have you leveraged your use cases internally to increase credibility, to maximize trust, and to win future projects?
So what we've done is we've posted in a Confluence page almost all of these processes that I've described. So as we've marched through different use cases and started to use AI in other areas, we actually allow our data scientists, as well as our data quality people, as well as other business people who are coming up with the ideas for deploying AI, to see what's gone before, as well as we continue to go deeper in different use cases. It allows our scientists, it allows our analysts, it allows our data designers to see all of the steps that we've taken previously, right? So it builds up the culture and it builds up the company muscle, if you will. That has been very, very powerful, and it allows, before anybody gets started on a project, to review past use cases. It's also had us really learning, right? Because we've had to understand at a very cellular level, within the confines of different types of deployment of AI, what are the kind of application issues that we have to be concerned about. Because oftentimes, because of the way MasterCard works, as a company that sits in a data ecosystem, right? We sit between banks and merchants. If you think about what we do, oftentimes our AI is being deployed by our banks, right? A fraud model is being deployed by our banks. So we have to be able to explain what's in our AI fraud, right? Products, so that they can watch out when they deploy it on their data. So we've had to really understand it. And so all of that information in each use case, we've started putting into our databases and into our kind of product descriptions, so that everybody can understand, and we have a little bit more accountability and transparency into our AI products. Yeah, again, still a journey, but we're getting better and better at it.
Yes, and an important journey. I think it's especially the ability to really work with your partners, to work with the banks, to make sure that everything is running smoothly for the end user is critical.
Well, we believe that ultimately, right, everything we do affects individuals,
Yes.
right? And we design everything at MasterCard from a data perspective, understanding that at some endpoint, right, even though we're really a B2B2C company, that the individual will be impacted. And if we're not really designing with that in our mindset, we're missing out, right? Because the machine is going to take off and learn from what we are designing today. And so if we're responsible today, the machine will be responsible tomorrow. But now is the time for us to design wisely and for us to design in a responsible manner. So that's why we're going through all of this now. It's really intricate. It's really hard. It's a lot of hard work. I'm very proud of what my team is doing and what we're doing with around the entire company. But it's a journey that we're definitely on, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes.
So, Joanne, what's next for your journey with AI, and what technologies are you investing in today?
So I think what's next for us is that we're realizing that other parts of our organization are using vendors, right? And they're using AI vendors. So our legal department, our HR department, right? They're using AI that vendors have developed. And we're realizing that we need to come up with a methodology to really do the right kind of assessment on AI that's been developed by others. So we're working in conjunction with a consortium of other companies to come up with an assessment model of that AI, to make sure we understand the ethical and responsible practices that vendors are using as they've created that AI. Just in the same way that I described, that we're creating this very ethical and responsible program for creating our AI that then we share with our customers, we're recognizing we need to understand what we're purchasing. So we're trying to figure out how do we do that for things like, you've seen examples of AI that will go through resumes, right, to select candidates. But we've also seen the examples of where that can go terribly wrong.
Yes.
We don't want to be on the receiving end of that type of AI. So how do we do those assessments in a responsible manner? So we're looking very strongly at how do you create those code of ethics and make sure that you're purchasing responsible AI. Same thing for going through document review in legal, right? You want to make sure that you're purchasing the right kind of methodologies, and that you also understand, because ultimately it is in your company, it is your responsibility to use the right tool for the right task. So that's next for us right now.
It's like you have to do an employee review for AI. Are you doing your job correctly?
Well, it's not so much an employee review, but it is a technology review.
Yes.
And I do think that there's lots of good products out there, but there's also some unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
And I do think that it does take responsible organizations to understand that it's still on you to do the right thing.
Yeah. I think that's
who
the point.
I think as an employee of MasterCard, I want that to be the kind of company that people come and work with. had, right? So,
Absolutely. Yeah, it speaks to the integrity of the company and the care.
Right.
The care that
and
the
it goes
company
back to your
has.
question on trust, right?
Yeah.
We want to be a trusted company when it comes to data and our data practices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Joanne, we have time for one final question. Where do you think AI and ML will go in the next 24 months? And what can our audience do now to be best prepared for that? I know it's a loaded question.
Yeah, really. I wish I had a crystal ball, right?
Yeah, me too.
I do think that we will see AI. First of all, I think you'll see more AI for social impact. I think that, if nothing else, we have seen in the past year with COVID that data can be used to solve really complex social issues. So I do think that as that becomes more of the norm, we will also be deploying AI to solve for social impact. We're looking at that as well. MasterCard today announced that we're making donation for vaccines in Africa.
Oh, wow.
And so we will be also, as we donate money and our technology, we'll also be pursuing how does AI play out for social impact. I think other organizations will be doing that as well. I think that we'll also see the reality that other companies will be coming on board to this whole idea of responsible and ethical AI.
Yeah.
That we must understand what data, and is the data fit for purpose, or do we understand the design of AI? Because AI is going to start learning. And so I do think that we're going to be on a journey in the next 12 to 24 months to do more of that work so that future generations of AI is a little bit smarter, a little bit more ethical, and that it thinks a little bit more human-centered. So I think all of those trends are ahead of us.
Wow, what exciting times. Thank you so much, Joanne, for being here today. And I think we covered a lot of really good information. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.
It has been wonderful having you, Joanne. And what brilliant insights. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Joanne. I am going to hand things back over to Catherine to round out this morning's content. Over to you, Catherine.
And that's a wrap for the second day of the Business of Data Festival. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'd like to send a huge thank you to all of our festival partners. Without them, the Business of Data Festival simply would not be possible. If you're not already subscribed to the Business of Data, visit the website today to keep up to date with all of our amazing content, including in-depth reports, interviews, and our weekly podcast. There you can find our just released report, Data Integrity Trends, Chief Data Officer Perspectives, produced in partnership with our global premier partner for the Business of Data Festival, Precisely. The report presents the findings of our research with 304 data-focused leaders on how successful enterprises are establishing and maintaining bases of high integrity data to fuel their data-driven business transformations. So thanks again for joining us today. We will be back tomorrow at the same time, ready to dive back into more complex and fascinating topics like experimentation analytics, data engineering, and social impact. Plus, there is still time to invite your colleagues to join. Invite them to sign up on the website for access to the broadcast tomorrow. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you tomorrow.